Yeah, great name. That would be absolutely amazing name for a rock band, to be honest with you. The Noble Savage. It's class, actually. You can just imagine. Yeah. Straight away. You can just imagine a heavy metal band, all right. Like,
and their whole gig is being naked in blue paint. That's their.
And if anybody else has any questions on the definition of what is a clan, as we slowly try to explain the definition of it, because we've definitely pointed out the fact that there is definitely a difference to our interpretation of the 19th century version of what is a clan to what the medieval version is. So just to go on a wee bit more, now that we've pointed out, hey, look, there is actually a difference between the 19th century version of it and the modern perspective of it. It then goes into the argument still further, because even from the academic side of things, especially in the military history right now, there is academics, Irish academics in the 15th century, they are arguing the fact that, you know, every single Irish family is a clan. You know, that's definitely something that you have even from the academic level right now. For example, the book on of Kearns and Gallowglass, it makes various arguments and stuff. What's your interpretation when you come across both academics and historians, and also just people who are reading up on this as a hobby and stuff, and then they turn around and they make the claim that or they even ask, you know, does every Irish person have a clan? You know, when they come to Ireland, you know, on the definition of what is a clan, can a modern Irish person whose family has immigrated in the last, you know, even this year has immigrated over and have a passport saying that they're Irish and stuff, you know, can they turn around and say that they're a part of the whole clan system or something? Or is this a case of, hey, look, if you're not Gaelic, then you're not really a part of the clan system? You know, what's going on here?
To me, the clan system was destroyed at the end of the 16th and during the 17th century. There are some associations, etc., and there are some people like Lord Inchiquin. There's a McGillicuddy down in Kerry. But I find that very funny, because all these people who are descendants, they all operate on primogeniture. They're using English law to justify a position that doesn't really exist. There's no more clans anymore. If there were, I think someone descended from Old English, even New English, like the first New English who came over to Ireland were actually Catholic. We mentioned Eoin O'Neill. His secretary, Henry Hobbenden, was New English family when became Eoin O'Neill's right-hand man. The Moors of Drogheda, who I think they later, you know, Moore Hall, one of them was made president of Connacht when the French landed in 1798. They were Catholic New English. The Bagnols, they operated almost like a clan as such, because they set up their own lordship. So clans don't exist, but everybody, to me, anyone can, if you're a Fitzgerald, you can say, I'm part of the Fitzgerald clan. It's something that's used now for touristy purposes or to do.
Well, I kind of agree in the sense of I have this opinion of that. So obviously, especially my side of things, and you know, you will have a load of O'Neills all come together and they sort of say, oh, you know, I'm an O'Neill, and so I'm part of Clan O'Neill. And I think when you, especially you touched on there, Philip, about how historians even further back into the late medieval period were trying to, some were trying to conjure up very much the same way we do today, this idea of a collective unit under a specific lordship, or obviously, and even earlier than that, we were still doing it. It's almost like a form of nationalism under a surname or a king group or tribal group, or, you know, a tour, you know, which we'll go through later on. You know, And I think like O'Heran, sort of the famous 14th century historian O'Heran, who goes around Ireland, famously got some of them incorrect, but he does sort of try to encompass these families within a clan grouping. And the way he writes almost sort of says, this is Clan O'Dowd, and this is they're from this area. He certainly gives it open to that interpretation. And I think that anyone from any of the diaspora, like Owen said, it doesn't really matter if they're Old English, New English, whatever, Scottish, and they're trying to say, I am part of this O'Neill. I think it's not a problem, because it's almost what is a clan? It's a kindred, it's a family, it's a tribe, it's it's all these sort of things. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with trying to say, and trying to get behind something that, like a coat of arms, which we know obviously, which we'll cover, mostly modern interpretations. But there's nothing wrong with that, behind getting behind that and sort of changing it to sort of fit a more modern interpretation of what we view the past as. Again, it just comes back to not making it maybe your whole identity, when it's because it's not quite right. It's a, I don't know if YouTube is, it's a bastardization of something that sort of harkens back, and it's a great flag to get behind, but just remember, it's almost like it's not, don't get so deep into it, because it's not the modern world.
If I could just add something there, I don't know if it's a tendency of human nature or specifically Irish to break things down. For example, I live in South Kerry. There are zillions of O'Sullivans. There's so many O'Sullivans that most O'Sullivan you meet, they don't use the surname O'Sullivan, they use a nickname. And a couple of years ago, when Joni O'Sullivan, he's from Carsaveen, he's a journalist on CNN, he actually did investigation on this, and he counted 100, I think it's almost 100 O'Sullivan nicknames in South Kerry. There's people down the road from me who are O'Sullivan Jacks, and everyone calls them Jacks. Nobody knows why. There was someone called Jack probably 100 years ago. I learned there that someone I know whose surname is Bat is actually O'Sullivan. They're O'Sullivan Bat. So you have these names, and with McCarthy's it's probably the same. And I'm sure up in Tyrone, if I go to Dungannon, I'll probably meet 20 different O'Neill families, and I'm sure they have nicknames.
Well, I mean, look at the way the Kenlowen broke down, and we have the O'Cahans and the O'Neills and the Loughlin's and all that sort of thing. I think it's very, like you say, it's almost human nature. I will just touch on that quickly, O'Sullivan, just we side bit for any O'Sullivans in the group. The O'Sullivan clan webpage actually lists a load of them in Kerry. So if you want a wee bit more information,
probably O'Sullivan's research.
Yeah, so I would say go across, either check out who Owen has said, or go on the O'Sullivan website, and it does list a lot of the we'll just say cadet branches.
So we've got one good question. So the term tribe, was that ever used in the Middle Ages to refer to the family units of Ireland, or the clans as we're calling them, or or was that something that maybe was used post-medievally by, say, the great historians of the 19th century?
Well, you're going to trigger me now. Because the problem I have is that, they're straight away in Ireland, especially between the period of 550, when, God, who is the Reroic at that point? It's, his name is bloody popped out of my head now for a second, but around 550 up to around the 12th century, what you have is the Tuat system, where you have around 10 to 30 ring forts brought together, and that then goes, if you go past that, then up to around, oh God, Owen will probably correct me on this one, around 120, then you're dealing with a Tuat, where you've got multiple of those Tuat groups brought together. And then they come into a confederation. that's what you're kind of dealing with for a good bulk of the early medieval period. However, when you say to it, which is directly translated into tribe, what people think of straight away is Bronze Age tribes from the Bronze Age period. And that's where I kind of have a problem with people chucking out the word nilly-liddy of tribe. So don't get me wrong. You know, there is a tribe system there. But myself personally, I do prefer the word king group, that this is a kind of a clan that's brought together, but it's also made up of people who are connected from marriage alliances, fosterage, adoption, you know, that's
Political
kind of
grafting.
yeah. You know,
That's
that are more kind of a confederation of families rather than a Bronze Age tribe. And that's sort of when people are saying tribe or chucking out the word tribe and stuff, although technically it is a tribe in a way, it's not a Bronze Age tribe. So I just need to note that before we carry on, because you know,
I do believe that the prefix dal, like the dal cash, is most, its closest anglicization is tribe or share. So, you know, I guess that you could say to that point of that question, was the term ever used? Not the actual English word or the Anglo word tribe, but there was a word that we sort of, the closest one is dal, but again, not in, like you said, they're not in the, it's not the context that you're probably envisaging of what a tribe is. Again, from whether you've studied any modern tribes of Africa and, or, you know, in a medieval context. And I do believe that actual tribe in some contexts has been seen as quite problematic as well, you know, in certain academic circles as well. So it's just, so I don't think it's ever really right to say. I will say tribal group, but again, it's just the language I'll use to, so that the layman can understand.
I think it's used to mean non-modern, non-Western, non-civilized. With one exception in the Bible. I'm not a Bible scholar, but I know there's this thing of the
tribes of
Israel.
Yeah.
And every so often some nutter thinks that there is, one of them came to Ireland. I think the Mormons had some idea that the Native Americans in what is now the States were somehow related to that, but I'm not a scholar of those things.
Owen, are you trying to say I'm not the chosen people here? Like, what's going on?
Well,
we're the chosen people, but we're just not the 12th tribe.
No, but I'll just, because you just put me in there, because there's other, like what you said there, we have like Aish Kunchin in Kerry. Aish can sort of be translated to people. Fermanagh, the men of Fermanagh are the men of Fermanagh, you know, and Pobal is people, and Tua can be a very primitive version of people, clan, or state. So again, the word tribe is almost like it's an oversimplification of a very complex system. And as that, do you know what? Can we just put that at the end of every sentence we all say tonight? Because I think that's quite a key point.
Related to that, Seamus has, I see here, Seamus O'Brien has asked, didn't MacLysaght use the term sept? What did he mean by that?
Ooh, I was waiting for this question.
Well, Michal, you're off the leash. Run.
No. Oh, I've been off. I always take myself off leash, right? Because the sept is like another word that's contentious and historically complex. You know, but it's not actually a native word to Ireland. It's an Anglo-Irish. Anglo-Irish documents from the 16th century sort of start to mention it, and it becomes common with MacLysaght in the 19th century. And it usually was used by the English to sort of as a subdivision of a larger clan in their interpretation. So often a branch of a family, like of its own like local base. Again, the closest word to that of a sept, if you wanted to take it from the Irish word, is like shlucht or sil, like the Silmurhi, or I can't remember what but they basically mean progeny or seed. but they're so you're like the progeny or seed of a bigger tree, bigger branch. So again, it's another word that's a more it was brought into Ireland. But I think, I don't know, I think, oh, you might disagree with that one. I don't know, kind of from your
No, I agree. I think it was used by Saxons or in the Saxon period. It may have, but it was used in English history referring to them. And then I think Irish historians at the end of the 19th century, possibly 20th century, picked up on the word because they were unhappy with clan. I used to use it, but I'm moving away from it because it has its own problems. It's a better word in some sense in that it doesn't have the baggage that clan has. Sort of, it doesn't have this. It's a very non-emotional word. It sounds kind of technical, almost Latin. So they were using it there for a while, and it doesn't have that baggage. It doesn't mean clan to me would normally mean non-modern again, but sept can mean anything in that sense. It's a small group.
Yeah. Like again, like Sol Murray, from who the McDermotts come from, and the Slugdate Sleen, they are the Irish for more, I would say, more accurate terms. But again, which we'll come on to, there are so many of those.
Yeah,
we just had so many words, so many things.
Where I live in Valencia, one of the McCarthy groups that had my land was Slug Donald Rick. And there's about 20 McCarthy groups. Some are Slug, some are clan, some are other words. So answering the question, another question there, how was it used? That's a very good question, and it's still being discussed.
Yeah, we don't actually have. That's another thing that really, when you say what is a clan, is that actually this is one of the topics that's really it's really being re-looked at again, because we've used from the 19th century. We kind of, and like Eoin says, they knew it was problematic, but it was sort of just like, right, let's kind of like bookshelf this for now, get on with all this stuff, because you've got to remember we've got the 19th century, obviously, this Gaelic revival, new interpretations, and they're sort of just, there's not a lot of people getting involved in it. That history is still quite segregated in social class and who can actually partake in it and has the funding and the ability to take part of it. So there's still a lot of information being sort of just glossed over to get to maybe the nugget. Everyone's trying to find the golden white city of the Mayans. So this word is really only being looked at again quite recently, and not just this word, but the idea of these sort of branches and how we understand it and how it fits in our new modern interpretation of medieval history. So
big time.
So everything said here could change in about 5 years' time.
Yeah. Because from the perspective, when somebody says, just getting back into the topic at hand, does every Irish person have a clan? Even if you're freshly immigrated from Europe into, let's say you come from Poland into Ireland and stuff, technically speaking, from a European 19th century perspective or whatever, even if you're a Polish, coming over with your Polish family and stuff, technically speaking, you are you're part of a family. This is your family. You are a clan per se. So technically speaking, if you've got an Irish passport, you're part of, a clan, depending on your interpretation and stuff. But what I want to elaborate on now is definitely pushing up a wee bit. What was it called? What's the difference between a Gaelic clan and a European clan? Because as Rachel pointed out there, even the Italians have clans, but if you're pushing over to the more native side, if you're talking about 15th century Ireland, for example, and you're pushing up to the northwest side of the island of Ireland, in my belief, there is a difference between the Fitzgeralds and their definition of what is a clan in the 15th century, and the definition that the likes of the O'Connors and the O'Neills have for the definition of what is a clan. Like, am I wrong, or is there, similarities there?
I think there are similarities. For example, in the Battle of the Yellow Ford, there was a captain there, Captain Percy. His father was the Earl of, I think Northumberland. His grandfather was. His brother was. And they all got into trouble with the Tudors at various stages. His, 10 times or 20 times great grandfather came with William the Conqueror. So to me, if any Irish family are a clan, the Percys are also a clan, but we don't use them. I know that I think Stephen Ellis, I'm not sure if he's retired, he's a lecturer in UCG. He wrote various articles saying that there were name groups, I think he calls them, in the northwest of England. But the big difference would come down to two things: land ownership, land inheritance, and more specifically, inheritance of the title. Who became the O'Neill Lord? Fitzgerald, Desmond, etc., should have been, normally was, through the oldest male, whereas in the Gaelic groups, it moved a lot. McCarthy's, for a long time, McCarthy Moores had primogeniture, whereas if you look at the O'Neills, Turlough Linnock, Shane O'Neill, then rather distant cousin Turlough Linnock, then back to Hugh O'Neill.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I will say, and this will sort of touch on another individual who asked about Scotland too, in that, and we sort of said it anyway, that the political system of the clans and everything was not static in history. It changed. So what you see at Culloden in the 18th century is not what you see in we'll say in the 5th century, whenever the king groups are coming in. So it's not static and it's not localized. And not only that, it can change through no matter where you are. So we will use, obviously, Gaelic clans. A great clan is the MacDonalds, who bridge Gaelic Scotland and Gaelic Ireland. Now, the problem with the MacDonalds is that in the 14th century, they're trying to be Irish, but they're doing it how we're complaining the Americans do it in the now. They're going over the top Irish. So they create this. They bring bards in. They start having like different septs of their or different branches have different roles within the king group. The McKinnons get to do things. They have this little island where they all Dunoon, where they all meet up and have a mini sort of gathering. I can't remember what the Irish sort of version of this is, but and they literally are totally different from the rest of Scotland's king groups, how they're operating. But because they're the biggest clan in the Isles, obviously that filters on down. And obviously you have the Reivers, you have in the border regions, you have Norse sort of influenced king groups in the north. So, and they all sort of converge together. And the Normans as well are obviously very keen to straddle the Irish and Norman world to their benefit, whatever works in their benefit. You right? Are you okay, Philip? Okay, sorry, I just heard whoopsies. No, so they're using whatever works in their benefit. So on the bottom level, on a local level, they could be operating very like a clan that people would understand in the local level. But obviously on the world stage, or the Norman world stage, whenever they go to London, they are operating in a Norman style, and they're and we see this with the Burkes, who famously go to Dublin to swear allegiance to I think it was Elizabeth, and they and then the minute they get home, they're done in the saffron, and they're just doing their own thing at a local level. So like I say, it's not, there's not one interpretation, and the family, I think the 2 points is there's not one interpretation, and that nobody was static in history, and there was a bit of to and fro depending on where you were, depending on not just where you were in locality, but where you were politically as well.
Yeah, so we've got some good comments and questions, actually. This one, did they burn and rewrite many books like some Irish did to fake their history? Yeah.
I would just say very famously, many, and Eoin will definitely, I'm sure, touch on the McCarthys and the rewriting, and the Brian Brew, who's been mentioned already. Their family very famously changed their genealogy. Whether they burnt books, I would say yes, because they were read in churches at the time, and churches were not just places of religious teachings; they were also political tools used by families to gain advantages. And the McCarthys, again, very famously founded within a ecclesiastical family. So yeah.
I'm not sure about burning books deliberately, changing documents, losing documents, but everybody all over Europe was doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I find it very funny when people take the Book of Invasions very seriously and insist that the Irish they came from whatever the daughter of a pharaoh, etc. But if you look at 16th century, like Spencer, writing in England in the 16th century, he talks seriously about Brutus of Troy, who's the great granddaddy of all the English, who came via Rome to England after the fall of Troy, leaving aside so therefore the Saxons are actually Romans, leaving aside the problem that they're actually Saxons. And he uses this somewhat cynically. I don't know whether he believed it, but some people did. Everyone had their own versions of history, which they, until the present, sort of, World War II, the Nazis, they had their own versions of history, sort of. History wars go back forever.
I think, because he said that I've heard they burn books. I think there's one very famous literal burning of books, which is a 17th century, 16th century individual. He was from a Munster family. I'm going to say McCarthy, O'Sullivan, O'Driscoll, one of those three main families. And he burnt a load of papers in the fear that he inherited some land and castle, and he burnt a load of papers and documents because he feared another family would read them and find out that they had claim to his land and title. So there's that, and I know it was used as a political tool in the 16th and 17th century in Scotland to burn the other family's records and then claim that, actually we should have owned that land. We've got the records, you haven't got any record. So burning their evidence in any potential court case later on. So that there is definitely evidence of it existing on these islands. But I guess it's not seen as a wider, not a tool used by everyone.
So there seems to be some really strong feelings about whose ancestor Brutus of Troy was in the chat.
I saw that. I'm fairly sure Spencer says English.
I know that Geoffrey of Monmouth, I think, in the 12th century writes that Brutus came and became, the king of the Britons, as it were.
Yeah.
So the Tudors may also trace their ancestry to Brutus, but several historians claim that, sort of the founders of the, the kings of England going back to ancient times.
Spencer also throws in King Arthur. He says that King Arthur came to Ireland and conquered it. He was basically trying to get rid of the problem of the Pope donating Ireland to England. So he said, no, King Arthur came to Ireland and conquered it. So that's one of the justifications for English having lordship over Ireland.
Right. Everyone wanting to claim ancient legendary history.
We're still doing it even to this day. We're still trying to claim ancient lineage. You still have people claiming to be Picts and stuff like this. And I think I established on another live not so long ago that ethnicity isn't static either. It changes. You can't say I'm ethnically something from 2,000 years ago. It's a ridiculous thing. The problem I find with those sort of narratives is that nobody stops at the same date to say that ethnicity started on this date, and therefore anyone beyond this point is a Pict, is a Viking, is a whatever, Isabel Beaker. Nobody stops at that. If we could just pick a definitive date and say whatever your ancestors' ethnicity was at this specific point, you can be that. But but no one ever does it. And again, it just exposes the narrative behind it, political narrative behind it, that we don't have a definitive pinpoint in history. So, but yeah, Brutus is a funny one.
Yeah, that is a funny one. Yeah, I think I read that when I got a transcription of Caxton's History of Britain. And I was like, oh, really? That's interesting.
Thanks for that source as well, Darius. Guys, to be honest with you, I don't mind what your interpretation of history is, as long as you put in the sources. So thanks very much for putting in your sources. Even if you guys have different interpretations between what the people are saying in here and what other people are saying in here, it's always really, really handy when you chuck in your sources and stuff. So even if you disagree with the panel that's here, as long as you're providing us with sources, I have absolutely no problems. It's when people come in here, get worked up, but they're not providing any sources, I'm kind of like, well, you're just screaming into the wall there, So as long as people are chucking in sources and stuff, I don't mind all the rants you're having.
I will just say that the sources of Barham and Alison Wilson, they are they're not mainstream ideas, even if they are sources. They are the fringes of the academic discussion, shall we say. So
Seamus there, it disappeared now. He mentioned something about a 17th century Irish historian. I'm fairly sure he's referring to Geoffrey Keating, who's where I take my name of my channel from, Forest Fassa. He produced a very interesting work, and the introduction is quite interesting in that he has basically an almost modern historiographical argument with like many of the Tudor historians, with Geraldus Cambrensis, etc. So I think Seamus is referring to Geoffrey Keating, Shatu Ukachin.
Well, I mean, I question anything anyone writes ever in any era of history, including today. I'm constantly harping on this on my channel. History is not set in stone.
Yeah.
Sources are written by humans who are inherently flawed anyway, and there's always going to be an angle that a chronicler has in writing a chronicle. In fact, I'm more likely to trust a letter written by a random woman to her husband in 1451 than I am to trust anything in, the Chronicles of France. It's like...
And I think that in history, in academic history especially, new techniques, new perspectives are always being developed. You can look back on different documents. Someone writing about a specific document 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, and now, you'll have 5 different interpretations. Or 10.
Yeah, I think, there's a really good example of people sort of arguing for contemporary sources being the most pure, but without realizing that, who's paying for them. And I use the example of, it's just like read any sort of manuscript that, read the Annals of Ulster, read the War of the Foreigners, read the Book of Invasions, as you would read the Daily Telegraph or there are other papers out there. But, as you would read the Daily Telegraph or the newspapers of today, with that sort of understanding that there is often a narrative, often a reason why they're writing the way they're writing. And that could be, we know famously that Brian Boru stood over the priest in Armagh when he's been made Emperor of the Gael and sort of says, write that bit in. He's famously stood by. The priest isn't going to argue with him. Owen has corrected me on the past about O'Donnell in the 16th century at one of the battles in Sligo, I believe it was, and his position in the said battle. So again, we like you said, Paul touched on it. We have to just be very, very aware of why they're asking the question, why they're writing what they're writing, not just what they're writing.
Just in relation to that, there is the Baha Eru O'Donnell, the life of Hugh O'Donnell, and I read some interesting works on it. One was by, it's in a little book published by the Royal Irish Academy that's hard to get. One article is by Hiram Morgan, the other I can't remember who wrote it, but he basically showed that many parts of Baha Eru were based on the book of I think it's Maccabees. It's something we never did in Catholic school. We never studied that in Catholic school because it's the Jews fighting was the Romans or the Persians?
The Persians.
Way back when. So they use this as a model. So if you're reading this primary source, but you don't have a knowledge of the Bible as a 16th or 17th century cleric would have, you're going to miss something important.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why a broad and well-structured education is very important in interpreting these things.
Yeah, I mean, I remembered just famously the Dalriada and in Ulster, and the changing of basically changing their whole identity to fit in with the Kennelowen and the O'Neills, and for years. And that's now learning about that a couple of years ago totally changed my understanding of actual Ulster history and its part on these islands and its part to play with Scotland, it really is just learning a little bit of context behind why they've done why these families are doing certain things, and like say just maybe digging a wee bit further. But I know that Man of Clay said there about modern historians, they don't agree with each other. You will find there's generally a consensus on most things. That kind of coming out with that kind of narrative can be very problematic, and it's often used by a lot of media today to sway you in certain ways of thinking. Academics tend to have, in a lot of areas, common ground. But there's just a few. You will get fringes that I won't name anyone on YouTube. But let's just say we all know them. Aliens did this. There were societies before civilizations. You just need to be very careful of that kind of narrative of thinking. All historians are at each other's throats with conflicting ideas on Irish history. It's not as
I think where the in my experience, where historians disagree with each other is not on the broad strokes. It's not whether there was a Battle of Hastings, it's or whether William of Normandy won the Battle of Hastings. It's on what kind of person was William of Normandy, right? Like it's in the sort of the granular levels where one person can read the chronicles and the evidence and say, well, he was a great king, and another historian will say, oh no, he was garbage, right? Like that's where you get the debate is at that several levels down from the big picture. But yeah, most of us agree that there was no great Atlantis civilization 300,000 years ago, for instance.
I will just add, because we're still on it before we go, because I imagine Philip might want fast turning into only elites and those who pay for education read no history. Actually, that's education and people from a lower class background who are receiving education, especially in the UK and Ireland, is at its highest. Education is not really one of those ones that's done by social class, in the sense that a lot of education is free, higher education is free. So I don't have an academic background. I don't have further education. My further education went into sports science. I'm not, I can't even really take the title of historian. I'm going to take historian tuber, like that was mentioned earlier. But one thing that I will say is that further education teaches you probably one of the most important tools, which is critical thinking. And I will say that anyone that hasn't been exposed to critical thinking, which was taken out of the education system of the UK a long time ago. So if you were educated in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you won't have been taught critical thinking unless you went to further education. That does put you at an automatic disadvantage. Yes, I'm sorry, it's not anyone's doing. It doesn't mean you don't have the skills, you know, but it's just something to just bear in mind. So it's not the elites, it's not the academics. Just, again, you've got to be very careful how you go down that road, because that can turn into very conspiracy theorist kind of talk.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, that's happening a lot lately. I have noticed a lot lately that academics and claiming that academics are having this kind of warped agenda view lately. Hey, look, the agenda at us with this left wing, and they're doing A, B, and C at us. And it's like, okay, right. Exactly what information is doing this to you? Like, what information has agenda? I'm not going to turn around and say every single historian is perfect. There is historians, we don't need to name names, that do actually have it, but that's where you in your own time, and you actually look and read exactly what they are doing and what they are saying, because I'm not going to turn around and say every single historian is a saint. They're not. In fact, if they don't have a political agenda, but that's why you need to sit down, educate yourself, and then sit down and criticize their nation and stuff, depending on, you know, ultimately, and is your agenda to actually find out, or are you up to something yourself? Because I that when I do come across these heads that are going around poking and prodding, especially when either myself and at times that they're claiming that myself and Rachel have agendas, and then presto, it ends up that they themselves have an agenda, and they're trying to push myself and Rachel over to for their own ultimate agenda. So, you know, yeah, this is where education and stuff comes in for sure. Like, and it's not like I might to hide any information. If I find a good chunk of main sources, occ.ie, and there you go. You've got a whole load of main sources in their original. Say, go and educate yourself on the original Old and Middle Irish as well. Rachel is one person. You keep turning around sometimes and saying that Rachel has an agenda. Rachel's telling you to read it, and it's original. She keeps drilling into your head. She doesn't trust modern translations, and I don't trust it as well, because when I look at Old Irish, for example, in the Annals of Ulster, and I translate it through, not only does the people who are writing the Annals of Ulster at the time have their agenda, which we were just talking about it there, but if you look at the 19th century, the 20th century translations, there's so much of it that I agree with, completely disagree with, to be quite honest with you. Like,
well, just remember that translation of, what was it? That was it a 12th century Irish epic, and that was in Old French, right? And you came to me and said, look, they talk about saffron clothing.
Literally
in this,
said
in
saffron,
this
yeah.
where the English translation said saffron, but I would looked at the French, and the word saffron does not make an appearance anywhere in the old French text. So the 19th century translation purposely translated yellow as saffron to give it this nationalist idea of saffron is the national dyestuff of Ireland, right? So, yeah.
Just in relation to academics, with exception of a few, the top ones, most historians are too busy chasing sources buried in archives, filling in forms to get funding, to be trying to indoctrinate people.
Yeah.
And they're only too happy if you read their book or buy their book.
And there is Philip has touched on it. There obviously has been. We all saw it. I don't care where you sit on the fence. We all saw it a few years ago during a world event, and this attempt to attack the academics and as this, like I said, with an agenda. And I think that this is not new. This was used in the early modern period. This was used in the medieval period. You know, this is a tactic as old as time. So to bring it back into the history context, it's not a new human nature doesn't change.
I actually picked up this book very recently. Nicholas Canny, Imagining Ireland's Past, Early Modern Ireland Through the Centuries. It's a history of the history of the I've only read about 15 pages, but it looks very interesting, and it's good research.
Yeah, I think it's important. Your 99% of the population has no idea how history is written, let alone what is taught in school is history, how we come to that knowledge. People imagine that since humans started writing, there's just this chronicle that's just been constantly written, and then that just gets published into a textbook, and then it's taught in school. But that is absolutely not how history is interpreted, written, translated, digested, any of that. Yeah. So I think that the history of history is interesting myself.
Could I just say something about what Dan Breen said now about the old Gaelic order being semi-nomadic? Because that was something the Elizabethans said all the time. But there's a difference between bullying cattle or moving your sheep, your cat, your animals around the place and being semi-nomadic. The Elizabethans loved to say that. Semi-nomadic, it meant savage. But at the same time, they would go into an area and say, wow, there was so much corn, which means wheat. There was so much corn that we burned. So these semi-nomadic people were busy planting corn or wheat at the same time. They did practice bullying. They moved their herds because they had large herds of cattle. But that's not semi-nomadic. And if you're a sheep farmer now, in mountain parts of Ireland, they do the same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say everyone across Europe, the world, that's the practice everywhere.
It was also used to justify the plantations of Ulster as well, and the fact that these people would move around, so there was so much land that them moving in, it was basically Ulster was basically barren. There was just a few roaming farmers with their herds. Again, it comes back to that, doesn't it? That it's the other end of that noble savage. It's the one where you really don't like them. Great point. Similar to Gerald of Wales propaganda piece.
Which is why every time Philip comes at me with imagery from Gerald of Wales, I have to remind him that the artist was not Irish, and that the artist probably never saw Irish people actually.
Definitely made up a few myths in there as well, because I do believe he spent most of his time in Ireland, probably in Dublin.
So it's the Dubs' fault, is that what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah. So, I guess now that we've been on for over an hour, it might be useful to just recap. So we're talking about the word clan, and we've had a whole lot of people join since we started. Gentlemen, when we're talking about clan in a general definition, how would you characterize clan? Not at a specific granular level, but just as a general definition, what are we talking about when we're talking about Irish clans?
Lineage-based kinship and political unit.
Yeah, great. That's great. That's really useful because we all need to be, if we're using the word, we need to kind of use it in vaguely the same way. So I think that's really useful.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. It's the same general thing, a kin group.
So it's really funny because everywhere. So I live in Korea right now, or at least I'm based in Korea, and Korea historically has clans. To this, and in some ways they kind of still influence modern Korean politics, even because if you're from, the Andong Kim clan, then that's a different prestige than, say, the Jeonju Kim clan. Is there a do clans in medieval Ireland have that same kind of, this branch of the clan is more influential and more powerful than that branch of the clan?
I think, one of the big misconceptions about clan is it's something united. I prefer to use the word lordship, especially when you're talking about big groups like the O'Neills. The O'Neills of Tyrone, I think you'll be showing a picture that I got from here in Morgan later, which shows the different ones. But they were split into many, many groups. One of the sources of dynamism of the Gaelic order, but also the sources of political problems, was the inheritance of the lordship. So, for example, Con Bacach, he's made first Earl of Tyrone, and his son, Matthew, is made the heir. Another of his sons, Shane, turns around and says no, and a civil war starts, which Shane wins. Then Shane gets killed. None of his children inherit. Turlough Linnoch, a cousin, a distant cousin, becomes the O'Neill of Dungannon, and then eventually Hugh O'Neill does. And Hugh O'Neill more or less wipes out most of Shane O'Neill's sons. So you have this big political infight. With the O'Donnells, you have the same thing. One of the reasons for the downfall of Tir Conwell in 1600 was that Neil Garrett went over to the English because he felt he'd been passed over. He should have become O'Donnell. So you have a huge amount of infighting within the Irish lordships and families.
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to where do you want to draw the line on what is the clan, as it were. There's never a point in history where a whole king group is united. And again, because Owen says a lot of it has to do with succession. It's very faction based, but when you're saying about families, are there branches of the family that go off and maybe even surpass? I mean, if you want to say the Eoin O'Neill is a clan because of all its links to individuals, well, then you have the O'Sullivans and the McCarthys. But then if you want to break it down to maybe on a smaller level, like the Kenaloan, who are from the wider, obviously then you have different levels of families will take on different roles within that, within the lordship or within the Tua, whether that's crowning rights for the inauguration, whether that's a family takes over a specific church and becomes part of the ecclesiastical side and takes over the ecclesiastical side of it. So there are very much similarities in anywhere a son or a relative could be slotted into a political position, no different from the Normans with their chamberlains and their,
right.
It's just on a more of a wider scale. They're always looking to put people into positions where allies and friends and family members. A lot of our serious case of nepotism, you know, within the lordship. And if they can't get a family member into that role because maybe it's already dominated by another person, the O'Hagans or whatever, suddenly the genealogies will say, actually, we are related. The O'Hagans are descent from Niall and Nine Sausages. You know, look at this document I found under the, you know, behind the cistern, you know.
Right. Oh my God, the unimpeachability of history.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, again, the rules changed as well. Actually, just Malachy just mentioned, I don't know what he's saying about them, but he mentioned the Eoin O'Neill and their succession is it's very famously, they had a more wider encompassing succession where it was, you had a lot of Eoin O'Neill Loughlin and the Eoin O'Neill Rathlins and Glenmaddoch. They were all part of this tool to who would be the ruler of the Eoin O'Neill. And then they had groupings that didn't fit within the inner circle. They had an inner circle and they had a wider circle. But again, that actually in the 7th century, one of the groups went, no, I don't want to follow these rules anymore. We're going to just have the kinship pass through our line, and then the Eoin O'Neill Cashel used that in that new ruling system to dominate the wider Eoin O'Neill group and just have it passed down through their line. So again, people are just being people. Just constantly trying to get a foothold and trying to be the more dominant, you know, having as much of the resources to pass on to their own descendants as possible.
Yeah. Let me see. Goodness, I'm looking at the comments. We have any good questions? Okay. Yeah. Okay, Philip, what's next?
I don't know. I have a very slow internet on my side. How, can you guys hear me and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard chunks of what you guys are saying in the comment section, and thank everybody in the comment section as well who have been giving decent comments and stuff. I pressed forward on my PowerPoint slide on my side, but it's very buggy right now. The next thing I wanted to talk about in the slides is what is an Irish coat of arms, and I know this is literally a massive topic on the definition of what is a clan coat of arms, especially around the 14th century, the 13th century, and even medieval period when we're talking about banners and stuff. This is something that changes a whole lot. Creative Contessa can definitely look at Europe and say, hey, look, like a coat of arms could be literally given to a single person alone. Never mind a singular coat of arms for a Pacific family that goes on for 2,000 years. And I would definitely say the same thing could be said in Ireland. So before we go absolutely apeshit crazy on the definition of what is a coat of arms in Ireland, let's kind of bring it in a wee bit. And first and foremost, like when it comes specifically talking of 410 all the way up to 1603, 18th century for the time being, just when we're trying to conclude and explain a lot of stuff that happened later on. Between 410 to 1603, from my understanding, we don't really know what, first off, what banner people are using to identify who, their king group is, who their, quote unquote clan is. It's very difficult to even find a banner to define most of these groups, from my understanding. And then on top of that as well, around the 13th century, especially when you're talking about the likes of O'Connor and stuff, it seems to be that they are also adopting at the same time the European version of a coat of arms, but it's not even going down to a single person. From our interpretation, it could be just given to an entire family, or of given to a single person is an arm at times. elaborate on that. Like, what's our understanding of the medieval period between 410 to 1603?
Well, I mean, so, you know, heraldry is something that evolves, at least on mainland Europe. You don't really get what we've recognized as you call them, coats of arms, family armorials, until, you know, you're really starting. There's a difference between a symbol that someone puts on a banner and says, okay, this is the symbol for this battle, and something that a family uses to identify themselves and their adherents and their followers. And that doesn't really seem to crop up in mainland Europe until the 12th century. So, you know, obviously the Romans had their, you know, their banners for each unit of their organization and in the army, but I'm not familiar even in Rome with, you know, heraldry as being a family affiliated thing rather than an organizational imagery to identify units on the field. So
yeah. I've done a bit of work on this actually, and we would call that proto-heraldry. Most
right.
people do that, so it's not heraldry as we would understand it today. But it's the seeds that lead on to heraldry. And then in England, you sort of start to see again this adoption, because we have a blank spot between the Roman era and the end of the Dark Ages. Let's just say William the Conqueror in 1066. When it comes to now, the first English heraldry, and I'll speak it from an English context because obviously they're the Normans who then come on to Ireland. The first sort of signs we start to see of any sort of adoption of any symbolism and is William the Conqueror's seal of St. George. St. George is often associated with the Middle East, and he's associated with, but he actually had a bit of a minor cult following with William the Conqueror in France in 1066. So, and we see his seal that he brings, his sigil that he brings across to stamp documents with, and this is adopted by other contemporaries of his lords, you know, because England was basically divided amongst 12 individuals. They really were the powerhouse of England, you know, the boy band that dominated. But heraldic schools start to form, like you say, in about the late 11th, 12th century in Spain and France. Spain could probably claim the oldest heraldic school, but the English, obviously, like a lot of things, adopted European things and then almost, I suppose, improve on it, or because it's in continuation. They start bringing it across to Ireland. There's absolutely no record of Irish families adopting any coat of arms during the Norman conquest of Ireland and subsequently up until, I believe, the closest one we have is the Kavanagh family, who have a sigil, a 14th century, 15th century seal that is similar to their modern coat of arms. So you can see that's the first time we have any sort of record. A lot of families claim they got them during the surrender and regrant, and the Norreigh and Ulster Arms Foundation School, the school foundation, or the individual who would write down the family records and their coat of arms, is in 1551. A lot of families would claim theirs come from then. I've not read the original works, but I do know that a lot of families were given coats of arms and titles during the surrender and regrant, but they weren't officially recognized within the heraldic sort of circles. So they weren't often recorded either. So basically, to get to the main point, is that there's actual no connection between, say, the Battle of Moira and the flags supposedly flown at that battle, which I believe is one of them that's written down in a later source as a green, yellow rampant lion with a green background, and the modern coat of arms today. You could maybe claim Tudor period, early modern period for some of them, but most of them are 19th century.
So fascinating. Anybody want to elaborate still further, or anybody in the comment section want to ask any questions when it comes down to Irish coat of arms? Because it is, even depending on, you know, the biggest problem is that we have it, maybe Owen can correct me on this one, but the modern day coat of arms that we see, when if you're a tourist and you made, well, even myself, and you made your way down to Blarney or Burnratty Castle, and you can see the keychains, and every single one of the keychains has your coat of arms. A lot of them was put together by Eamon de Valera, from my understanding, unless it was someone else who put it together, wasn't it?
There was I think there still is a chief herald.
Yeah.
So I think like the chief herald's office was kind of, I think they must have been bored or something in 1922, and they began to invent a pile of stuff. And then I think the government just ignored them until the early years of this century, when there was a bit of a scandal over a certain person claiming to be a McCarthy when he wasn't even. If you go on the internet, you can find stuff about that sort of scandal. But to me, it's kind of touristy.
Yeah.
McGlycett did some work on whether there should be a sept coat of arms, and the Plunkets are a really good example of septs. Yeah, the Plunkets. Now they very famously, their original coat of arms was a black background with a silver blazon through it, and they married into the Baron of Dursee's family. I can't remember but they had a white castle. Or it was a black castle. Sorry, it was a white background with a black castle. But because they already had a black background, they adopted a white castle for that line, for that female line. But this was like fourth or fifth, no, maybe third generation Plunket in Ireland. And yet you start to see it appear on the older branches, families. They adopt that, even though they don't descend from the Dursey line, they all adopted the white castle on their coats of arms. So McGlycett puts forward a case that actually there is an argument for sept coat of arms, as well as using 19th century understandings of land ownership and clan sort of owned, like how it was owned by the wider king group in the 19th century. Obviously, we're now learning it's maybe a little bit more, it is a lot more complicated than that. But that there is an argument for coats of arms. So I, again, much like my original point earlier on, where a person would say, I am an O'Neill, therefore I feel some affiliation to other O'Neills and the area that the O'Neills come from, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting behind a symbol that represents your family. But again, just take it with that it doesn't harken back to some ancient man who cuts his hand off to win the lordship of Ireland, or Ulster. So and again, I think the O'Neills adopted the red hand in the 14th century too, because for political dominance of Ulster, so against the De Burgh. So
yeah, some interesting questions there. Just guys, can we just reel it in a wee bit in the comment section here? There's a lot of names in there I do respect in there, guys, but when it comes down to modern stuff and stuff that's just happened right now, I know people are very passionate about stuff that's happened right now, but at the same time, first and foremost, you'll get me in trouble with the algorithm, because as we were saying there, a lot of things have agenda. What was it called? We're all literally on a platform that is built on agendas. So if we want to keep the the train going and not kicked off the agenda platform, I think it's a good idea if we play by the rules and just keep to the topic at hand of what is a clan, because people are saying very passionate things in the comment section there. and I'd rather not be kicked off the platform, especially when we're just innocent here. We're just innocently talking about what is a clan. We're not doing anything mental. So if everybody could be just polite here and just keep to the topic at hand of what is a clan, that would be great. Also, on top of that, guys, thanks very much for everybody who is keeping to the topic at hand. Thank you for providing information there and sources and stuff. Even if we disagree with you and have our own interpretation or even agenda on itself, it does mean a lot to myself that you guys are providing, when you do make claims and stuff, providing information on top of that as well. Okay, so
there's actually a really good question there, and maybe Dr. O'Neill can answer this one. So aren't most coats of arms just people picking random symbols and making them up? So, you know, how in not just medieval Ireland, but, you know, how is it that families eventually come at, well, this is going to be our coat of arms, and then, you know, how is that made official? I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to answer.
I'm not an expert in coats of arms at all. I don't know much, but I think you answered your own question. To me, they made it okay. There were some legends like the red-handed the O'Neills, which that legend that I think, I'm not sure which of the sons of Mill is supposed to have cut off his hand, because it's something that comes back. It only appears much later. I think there are some symbols that appear, but the rest of them, like I'm looking at the picture you've put up, O'Doherty, 3 shamrocks. I find that one.
Yeah, that does make sense, since the earliest.
Whoa, Jesus Christ, we're off the leash.
Yeah. I do believe that the earliest O'Doherty coat of arms is a white background, gold cross, a black griffin, and another animal on it, and that's the oldest coat of arms. And even then, it's not like thousands of years old, but that is the oldest coat of arms. So that one doesn't make any sense.
Sounds better than 3 shamrocks.
Yeah, but what I mean is, you would think that coat of arms with the 3 shamrocks, one of them would be one of those symbols I just mentioned. If it was 3 gold crosses or 3 black griffins, maybe I'd have got it. But 3 shamrocks, there's no reference to it, and I wonder if it's now. I will say there's a lot of people that can tie in how. So the shamrock maybe has something to do with the Kenaloans, possible abduction of St. Patrick, and the O'Dohertys are a branch of the Kenaloan. So maybe there is some way that's how whoever designed that has come up with that design. But again, that's a very modern, very modern design.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I mean, depending on where you were in medieval Europe, because again, medieval Europe, not a monolith, 1,000 years of history, things are evolving pretty rapidly, actually, as the decades and centuries wear on. But eventually, most polities develop their own college of arms, which basically regulates what sort of heraldry people can use and have, and your heraldry actually gets registered with the College of Arms. And you know, not everyone got to have a coat of arms. This was in most parts of Europe. This was originally restricted to members of the aristocracy, and then of course you started to be able to buy your way into the aristocracy.
I want to add, actually, originally in the very start of Couture, anyone could have them. The aristocracy set up the heraldic I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, the heraldic groups, the
College of Arms.
A College of Arms, thank you. I just could not get that word out. They set up the College of Arms to restrict it. Now, so that because they didn't like the fact that anyone could just because there's a very famous couple of cases. Now, I will say that I'm talking very, very foundation beginning. They very quickly encompassed it. And then it did do a full circle, where then obviously, especially during the Tudor period in England, where the merchant class effectively became the nobility of England,
Right.
because they could just buy their way in. So it did do a full circle, like you say. But yeah, there were a lot of peasants who were just using coats of arms in a very similar sense, the way that shops were using them,
Right.
in the sense to say, like, I am a sheep seller, or I am a sheep. They were using it as a symbol to say, look, this is me and my product. And they were stamping whenever they funded any village, maybe towards the church, if they were a small time farmer, and they funded towards the church, they were getting their coats of arms put in it. And again, the nobility weren't happy about this because it was something that they wanted to restrict. You know, and that's why the College of Arms was sort of founded, to help police it, you know, and to ostracize the general plebs, the normal people.
Upstart peasants.
An interesting point there is, if you look at Spain and Portugal had this concept. In Portuguese, it's fidalgo. In Spain, it's hidalgo. They both mean son of someone.
Yeah.
To be a noble, you're a fidalgo. So you could be a poor nobody, but your grandfather or your great-grandfather was an important noble. In England, like, you're the second son of the second son of the second son of the Earl of something, you're gone. Whereas in Spain and Portugal, they preserved this. It's also related to the idea of pureza de sangue, purity of the blood. In Gaelic Ireland, you can say there was a bit of fidalgo, sort of. Eoin O'Neill, his two brothers, Cormac and Art, they were both regarded in the Gaelic world as nobles, even though Art was illegitimate. And even though Cormac MacBaron, he was a nobody under English law. Under Gaelic law, he was a lord. So you had this differentiation, which disappeared, never got understood in the 19th century reinvention of Gaelic Ireland, which continues till now.
You know, I've always wondered when in English history that that lack of inheritance of rank, you know, became part of the custom. As you say, in Spain, second son of the second son of the second son is still a lord, right? Whereas in England, you're right, it goes away. It goes away pretty quickly. But I'm more familiar with later inheritance regulations.
Yeah.
Do you know when that practice started?
I don't know, but I have a feeling that there's a lot of the early medieval period I'm not up to at all, but I think when people talk about the Crusade, they often say it's the second sons are heading off because they're not going to inherit anything. I think in Frankish law, which then became the main law in France, and I think the Normans brought it to England, the eldest son inherited everything. I could be wrong, because like under the Saxons, like if you look at 1066, you had Harold Godwinson, and all his brothers were made earls, including the one Tostig, who kind of betrayed him. Whereas then along come the Normans, and that seems to disappear. They didn't like brothers who were powerful.
Yeah, it seems to be it's definitely within the with the arrival of the feudal system. There's a case, someone had written a case about how we interpret a clan that's Anglo-Saxon. There's a lot of Anglo-Saxon politics and family sort of settings that sort of may actually lean towards a clan system too, that we would actually recognize in Ireland and Scotland. So and like you say, whenever his sons, Harold's sons freed Ireland, there's never any indication that it's just one son being over the other, that they're working together to. And now who knows what would have happened if they'd won, but that's beyond the point. I think you've also got to remember as well, of obviously, like Owen says about the Frankish system, is that, like I said earlier, when the Normans come across to England, I'm not joking when I say that. I don't know the exact number, but it's literally England is divided amongst 12 families.
Right.
You know, it really is very like very wealthy, large land holding magnates now hold the land. And to divide that up amongst all your children would be to lose so much power when everyone else, all your neighbors have, all the other 11 families have so much power. So there was a lot of investment into the next song because he had a lot to do. He had a lot to rule. He had a lot of, he had to be brilliant at everything, effectively. Right. So yeah, I think that the Norman sort of and the arrival of feudalism is probably in England anyway. The start of that would be my guess, just from the points I've raised.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense, actually.
Okay, so just getting back onto the topic of coat of arms. Okay, I just want to finish up the questions here that you guys have and stuff. First and foremost, this coat of arms, my surname, the O'Donnell, I think is amongst a few general ones when it comes down to coat of arms and stuff. From my perspective, yeah, I would say that the O'Donnells, because the O'Donnells are so easy to research, that they are one of the few families that are definitely, genuine for my interpretation of coat of arms and stuff. Anybody want to elaborate on that one?
What is it? I don't. What's the as in? Are they saying it comes from some sort of antiquity or? Sorry, my surname O'Donnell is, I think, one of the few. Maybe they're saying it's one of the older ones. Again, there's no Irish one that's older than the early modern period. So you're talking Tudor period for any of those. That's probably there's none that go beyond that. And I think, like I say, Kavanagh's and the O'Neills, they have the strongest claim, but it's based on, like the Kavanagh's is based off a sigil, not a coat of arms. There's no record of it's based off a sigil. So, yeah, the O'Donnells are definitely not one of the ones that are made in the 19th century. I think they're one of the ones that come from 1551, and the Norrie Heraldic Carriage, Norrie and Ulster Heraldic Carriage. So yeah, again, old enough, couple of 100 years older than most, but not to some antiquity.
In regard to the O'Donnells, I'm fairly sure that there were a couple of O'Donnells who went to Spain and became nobles in the Spanish nobility. And I think there could even still be a Spanish noble whose surname, or one of whose surnames is O'Donnell. So I'm fairly sure that they would have got their own or developed their own coat of arms, even 2 or 3, over the last 400 years.
Yeah,
I don't know them offhand, but I'm sure you can find them.
Yes, no, you raise a great point, because I do believe there are a couple of families that when they fled to mainland Europe, they still had a lot of connections, obviously, to Ireland. And I do believe some of the coats of arms are actually adopted from the European branch. So they've returned, they've obviously gone, oh, I've been given this coat of arms, and their family in Ireland have gone, oh, so have we then. So I do believe some of the coats of arms of families do have a European connection. And I do believe, and I can't think of the family off the top of my head, but I think they're an Ulster family as well. That's the one I'm thinking of. So yeah, there's a lot of European connections there.
Okay.
What would be the O'Donnells?
Okay. When it comes down to symbols as well, you guys are going. Okay, when it comes down to the likes of symbols, when it comes down to reptiles, snakes, like I myself have a snake in my coat of arms and stuff. However, I'm not going to elaborate too much on questions like this one here, for example, just because it's going way off the subject. I know it's a great question and everything to go into the exact symbols and stuff, but the two major problems here is, first and foremost, it's trying to identify which ones are made for tourist reasons, or as one of you guys pointed out here, is it a legit coat of arms that goes back to the likes of the O'Donnells and stuff? First and foremost, can be quite difficult. And on top of that as well, when it comes down to the actual symbols within the coat of arms itself. We don't specialize in coat of arms and symbolism to do with coat of arms. And even on top of that, it depends which era the coat of arms is put together, because depending on what era, depending on the setting, the symbols can be different. So I'm not going to go into and start answering a lot of these things, because it really depends on the setting and stuff. And you'd have to elaborate a wee bit more. But then it's going way off subject when we go into that level of detail. I just kind of wanted to go through the very basics of coat of arms. And did clans during the medieval period have coat of arms, which for the most part, it seems that they didn't during the period of 410 to 1603. Many clans may have banners to represent themselves as a whole, which fits in with the society itself, but individual coat of arms and all that stuff doesn't seem to be the case all the time. But we do have unique cases of that. For example, the O'Connors did have their own unique coat of arms at selected points in history. Just moving on slightly there, a few other examples here that maybe Eoin O'Neill wants to elaborate slightly on.
Yeah.
Now, comically, I did put at the very top of this actual Southern Ireland as a bit of a dig at Micheál there and his boys, because in Ireland, when I'm visiting my friends like Micheál up in Northern Ireland, they'll refer to the entire island of Ireland outside of Northern Ireland as Southern Ireland, which is Dublin and
no, it's a mouthful. We just call you the South.
yeah.
The South.
But
Like everything.
That's not Southern Ireland. That's the south of Ireland. Or if you want to be pedantic, it's the south of Southern Ireland.
Yeah.
And can I just say this on the other map I sent you, this is I messed up. The one there that says Northwest, that's from Hiram Morgan's book, Tyrone's Rebellion. It's a brilliant look at lordships in 1590. If you go back to the other one, it's by William Smith. It's in an article called The Conquest of the Iveragh Peninsula, in a brilliant book.
Actual
that is actually looking at that's Desmond. Desmond nowadays is South Kerry and Beara. Until 1607, basically, Kerry was what is now North Kerry and West Kerry. So basically, it was Dingle and Castle Island, Tralee, that part. South Kerry and the West Cork and Beara Peninsula was called Desmond, which was nothing to do with the Earl of Desmond. It was the Kingdom of Desmond of South Munster. It's the McCarthy Moore Lordship. And the last official McCarthy Moore died 1596, 1597, Donald, which is in the middle of the 9 Years' War. And if you, this is almost as close to Spain as you can be in Ireland. So the English were very, very worried that the McCarthy Moors might support O'Neill. So when McCarthy Moore died, they did what's called the Desmond Survey. Basically, they went through everything he owned, all the rents that he got, which is all on, you had mentioned the UCC South site. It's there. You can actually see it in the original Elizabethan English. So you kind of have to read it out loud to yourself, saying it phonetically to understand parts. But they have all the different types of rents. One rent is actually for the Lord's wife. And if you look there, you can't get enough detail there, but there's about 20 different groups, which includes at least 10 McCarthys, some O'Donohues, and lots of O'Sullivans. Most of that, the large amount of land is held by the O'Sullivans, O'Sullivan Bear and O'Sullivan Moore. But it just shows you how fragmented the lordship was. And if you jump ahead to the other one, the one here, Morgan's one, that is the north of Ireland. So people say the O'Neills of Tyrone, and there he has Hugh O'Neill, he has Cormac O'Neill, and various, hold on, I just read it out myself. He has Turlough Glynnock O'Neill, Philip Mac Turlough O'Neill, Hugh MacNeill, McCoyne O'Neill, Cormac MacBaron, and Eoin O'Neill. And he doesn't even mention Art MacBaron. There's some smaller ones that are not there. That just shows you, like, it's rather than clan, it's lordship is what mattered politically. And these things splintered. For example, in Tyrone, the top right-hand corner is written Philip MacTurnock O'Neill. He held Tomb, or Tomb Bridge, I think it's called now, which was a crucial crossing. And I don't know since what happened to Lough Neagh if you still have eels, but it was a really, really important eel fishery. O'Neill had him assassinated just before the 9 Years' War and took the land for himself because he needed it to prevent the English from coming from Carrickfergus into his land. So that, like, if you Google what clan territories in Ireland, you'll get a map which will show you all these huge territories. Whereas these territories changed so much. Like the O'Neills claimed Fermanagh, so did the O'Donnells. The O'Donnells were always trying to press into Connacht as much as possible, which is an interesting case because we already mentioned the Burkes. And by the end of the 16th century, some of the Burkes had submitted to the O'Donnells, and like you had the pro-English Burkes and the other, and like the ones that O'Donnell was dominating. So it's an extremely dynamic and flexible system. There was no frozen clan territory. 50 years before that, there would have been quite a few differences, and then 10 years later, it all changed because of the defeat at Kinsale.
I think a better way to look at it, sorry for butting in there, Micheál and Rachel, but I think a better way to look at it is more, rather than Celtic or clan territory, is more of the Gaelic realm, that you're going from the Anglo-Irish world, and the moment you're starting to go up northwest, or even over to the Kerry territories and stuff, that you're now entering into the realm of the Gaelic rather than going into these set clan territories and stuff. Maybe that's a better way to look at it.
Again, though, I think the lines are again blurred the same way we talk about the Usman or the Hiberno Norse or all the other things, in the sense of, because we see that Eoin O'Neill really over eggs his Gaelicization in certain parts. We start to see the Crannogs are used as a political tool in the sort of 15th century, 16th, early 16th century, not just by Owen, but others, as this way of saying, I'm Irish and these are English. They're putting this mark on it. They sort of fallen from grace almost, but then it almost became used as a political weapon by certain families to sort of don't crown my brother, don't crown my cousin, because they are pets of the English, and I'm an Irishman, and we start to, it's so, and it's not, this is a story as old as time for many factions, and like we've talked about before, about the when the new English are coming in and they're referring to the old English as Irish dogs because they're not Englished in their eyes. So I think it waxes and wanes as whatever's happening in the wider political world on these islands, and are just used as, symbolism is a very powerful tool. We see it commonly even today. Flags are being drawn on certain things, and whatever your interpretation of that is, it invokes something in, whether it invokes whether it's reviled or sanctified, and when you see this flag on a roundabout, that it's not a new thing. So
because I have a massive problem with all that as well, because a lot of people do come at me when doing the Q&A and stuff, and Micheál, you're way better than I am when it comes down to it, because I often watch your live streams as well. I'll have Micheál on one side and I'll have Rachel on the other side playing live. And when Micheál is covering his Q&A, he's so sharp when people turn around and says, okay, I'm in O'Sullivan. Micheál's brain is suddenly like, oh, you're from blah, blah, blah land. But then people want specifically the lines of territory, that their ancestors, their rightful land and territory of where their ancestors come from. But as you've pointed out there, and when I've done my study as well, to try to find defining lines is so difficult before the arrival of the English with the Tudors, when the Tudors are literally marking exactly, okay, this is Kerry, we're going to mark this out now. It can be very difficult to find defining lines, as Dr. Eoin O'Neill has pointed out. Those lines are constantly shifting, they're constantly changing, and it becomes even... Now, you guys can easily sweep my legs here and correct me on this one, but from my interpretation, it does seem to change depending on the pasturing of land, depending on which way they're competing, especially when you're dealing with a cattle raiding society where we're pasturing. One moment we're pasturing close to the Irish Tower House, and then when it comes down to the summer months, we need to get that cattle out into wider areas, which opens up then to not only trying to control that land around the cattle that you're trying to pasture, but also on top of that as well, the cattle raiders coming in and disputing that land. That seems to be my interpretation, and why land seems to fluctuate within the Gaelic realm and constantly moved and shift. Would I be right on thinking that, or am I just gone completely off the point?
I think you are in a way, but in Gaelic Ireland, there kind of was plenty of land, but a shortage of peasants. So many peasants, like if the Lord annoyed them, they just simply run away. So it was the Gaelic Irish way of going on strike. They just run over to the next Lord and say, "Hey, we know how to plant, we know how to move, to whatever you do with cows." And the Lord would say, "Great, here you go." So that or they could do it from a Gaelic to an English system, etc. So and so just to answer a couple of Dan Green is asking about a lecture on Trust and the Tira. I think that was James O'Neill talking about the nine Years' War.
I will touch on one great book if you are interested in. So Dr. Paul McCarter's Territories and Political Boundaries of Medieval Ireland. He sort of goes through all the tricoquettes, which is it's which the modern baronies that we have today, a lot of them are the descendants, the Norman descendants of the tricoquettes. A lot of them followed. So there's something you've got to remember when you are drawing these lines about what is the clan holdings. In that Dr. Cormac McSporran sort of postulates that the provincial kingdoms may actually have a Bronze Age origin, but what was actually, so the boundaries sort of existed on what this was Connacht, this is Ullid, this is, but what was actually held by those so you almost have an aspiration of, like, we know Ireland is always going to be Ireland because it's an island. So but when you go to France and you have two villages suddenly on the Belgium and French border, and that can alternate between the two of them for centuries, where the country's lines are, and they will both sides will claim that those two villages belong to them, and if you look at a map from any of those two countries, both those villages are in their map, and that is so you will get these sort of what is ours, what we claim is ours, and what is actually ours. And I often sort of say that the Normans had the same problem in that, especially in Munster. I'm pretty sure Owen could name quite a few families, and it happened in Clare with the declares and stuff. When a family were granted land by the English king, never administered it, never took taxes from it. It happened a lot in Munster that the Norman sort of lords were saying, and you look at the maps. You actually look at the maps online of Norman held lands, and some of them they were officially, according to the English, held by the English and were given to Normans, but the Normans never received any taxes from them. In fact, one of the families who ruled, the O'Driscolls, I can't remember who it was, very famously for the first generation, didn't ever get any of their taxes. And it was an heiress's husband who finally managed to sort of take the land and go, right, I'm getting taxes. And then you see a steady decline over 10 years. So he must have took it and went, right, you're going to pay me taxes. And the O'Driscolls went, yeah, here's 10 shillings. Next year they get 5 shillings. Next year you got 2 shillings. Next year you got none. And they just went back to the old way of running it. And so
why don't Irish men care about tax?
The McCarthys in South Kerry and Desmond, that went on. I think every 50 years or so, the Fitzgeralds would kind of do a bit of force, and McCarthy would pay some rent, and then just turn around and ignore him. And like you mentioned about territories, most maps they'll show North Kerry completely Norman. They think, with poor old O'Connor Kerry is always forgotten. And like, it's a beautiful castle. It's you can climb up to the top of it. It's Carrigafoyle Castle, which I really recommend. But another funny thing, like if you think of Peg and Dunquin, Dingle, Irish speaking, it was all held by Norman lords. The Knights of Kerry, Fitzmaurice's, the Ferreters, etc. Whereas now it's kind of regarded as the pure Irishness, whereby it was ruled by the Normans since, I think, 12 something.
Yeah, so again, like say clan territory and stuff, it's almost it'd be impossible, and not just because, like Philip has said, about boundaries sort of shifting, because I mean some are static, because you're going to use natural features, rivers, hills, mountains, impassable zones. Donegal's a great example about this, when the middle is actually quite inhospitable in medieval Ireland, and it's just the outer rim that sort of but there are other factors at play here, and then when there's two families sort of saying we both own this, and I guess it just depends on whenever the map was drawn and who was the richest family at the time.
It really does put a lie to the statement, these are our ancestral lands.
Yeah.
Okay.
One point is that if you've got a castle, a lot of Crannogs have family associated, family churches. So where your family could have been earners, which are land-holding families within a church. I think those are great markers, and they're static. They're buildings, so that they're there. They're great markers for ancestral land. But I wouldn't look too far into outside of more the back garden of the castle, the church.
This is my back garden. No one's having it.
The castles got burned down all the time.
Yeah.
Killorglin was originally called Castle Conway, Killorglin and Kerry. And basically that Killorglin it was the frontier between Gaelic and Normans. And until the end of the 16th century, the castle kept getting burned down and changing sides between McCarthy's and the Fitz Desmond.
Happy days. Okay, so do you guys have any questions on your family surname, or any questions whatsoever to do with borders or anything in Ireland? But I'm just quickly scanning through. I remember I don't think there's any specific questions right now to do with Irish families or anything. But if you guys have any questions whatsoever on,
someone's asked a question about Irish counties.
Yeah, I thought that was an
here,
interesting one.
Are you talking about this one here?
Yeah, where the Irish counties that all the Irish are so proud of, especially for sports, and English invention.
Want to take over that one?
Yeah, they were, but they were based off the earlier Trickett. So all you got the Trickett became the baronies, and the baronies became the counties, encompassing. But and they tried to stay true to, if you see the Normans, when they moved into a Trickett and made it a barony, unless they were large. So you'll find that there's a couple in Tipperary that have upper and lower in the name, and there's one in. So they've split the barony in half. They tried to stay within the old Trickett system. So there's a lot of overlap. A lot of the boundaries, similar boundaries between our ancient Tua and not ancient, I hate using that word, our medieval Tua and our medieval Triquequets, which are the smallest provincial systems, they do overlap with modern counties, with the exception, obviously, of the modern state of Northern Ireland, which kind of really messed things up because that was another thing. So when you say it's an English invention, the counties as they exist today are an English invention, but they're built upon an earlier Irish system, with some minor, but not minor, some changes. So I guess it didn't. I guess it really comes down to your version of, well, the names are English now for the most part, written in English. The lines were drew by Englishmen as they exist today. If you want to do that, you can say they're English, but obviously if you're more, I don't know, anti-Anglophile, anti-English, and you want to claim Irish, you can claim that they have links through ancient lines too. So
I actually don't know much. I know, for example, the Beara Peninsula, it looks like a geographic whole, but 1/3 of Beara is in Kerry. And they were an original kingdom, the kingdom of Desmond, but it got split up. And I'm not sure the reason why they drew that line, because it doesn't make that much sense. Because if you're driving from Kenmare into Beara, you're going along a road that has well painted lines in the middle, and suddenly you come to a sign that says "Welcome to Cork," and there's no more painting. And it makes no sense where the border is there. Another interesting one is Clare, because Clare or Thomond, until I think the 17th century, for about 300 years before the 17th century, it was part of Connaught, which makes geographic sense, except if you're, I hope there's no Clare people listening, they'll kill me.
No.
Traditionally, Clare, because of Brian Boru, is part of Munster. But geographically, it doesn't make any sense. It's,
it was political.
The wrong side of the Shannon.
It was it just shows that was a political thing that happened in the 14th century. One of the O'Briens there. Yeah. But it shows you how it can all change. I mean, we've lost Meath, the ancient kingdom of Meath. We became the four provincial kingdoms instead of 5.
It's wild how we just lost Meath as well. People just kind of forgot it existed after, what was it, during, what's crazy, they kind of just forgot about it during the Wars of the Roses. It was Trim Castle was right there. And the English were just like, well, this isn't really a safe location against the Fitzgeralds. Let's go back to Dublin. And the people just forgot it existed, The Fitzgeralds just kind of occupied Meath, and that was that. It just disappeared, which is absolutely wild. I think it just kind of merged into Fitzgerald territory, didn't it? Meath.
Right, Fitzgeralds, there's Nugents and Plunkets within there.
Because it was under the Mortimers. You see, the Mortimers kind of owned all that land and stuff. And then, from my interpretation, you guys can correct me there, but what happened is the Mortimers had it, and then the Yorkists had taken over Trim, but they never actually occupied Trim. And then, what was it called? During the Wars of the Roses, the Fitzgeralds kind of occupied all those territories around Trim and just merged it into their own kind of Leinster territories. And I think we just kind of forgot Meath existed, was it?
The forgotten territory.
Because there's no, I expect during the Wars of the Roses, there would be a big spectacular siege in Trim Castle and stuff. And people just kind of forgot Trim Castle existed. And people who were in Trim Castle kind of was just like, well, the Fitzgeralds kind of surrounded us. Let's go off to Dublin. And that was that from my interpretation. I don't know.
I don't know. Nothing says you have too much land if you can just no one cares if you.
The Fitzgeralds kind of merged it into Leinster, and that was it. Just disappears during the Wars of the Roses, from my interpretation. And then when the Tudors come in, the Tudors have no clue what Meath is. So there you go. I think that's what happened. It just kind of merged into Leinster during the Wars of the Roses.
I think Mead under the Tudors, it broke after the Fitzgeralds were knocked out. You had like Lord Dunsany, Lord Plunkett, the Slane family, the Slane. So you had a series of small March lordships, which were important in protecting Dublin. Same as like if you jump to the end of the 1640s, when Ormond was besieging Dublin, he tried to take all the north of Dublin, between Dublin and Louth. He tried to take all those ones. He did most of them, but then after the Battle of Rathmines, they all changed over again. They all got recaptured. So he had a series of minor places which were important, blocking an advance from Ulster towards Dublin.
Okay, do you guys see any other question, or if you guys in the comment section want to chuck in any more before I just slightly advance forward there on the whole thing of clan territories and all that sort of stuff? We kind of answered it there with the whole thing of it being kind of more of a blur rather than defining lines more than anything else. Do you see anything there, Rachel? Sorry.
Well, there's the question it is tangentially related. Were the Desmonds allied with the O'Neills and the O'Donnells with the Ormonds? And I mean, when? Like, maybe that question needs to be narrowed down a little bit in terms of time.
If you're talking about what I was just talking about there, which was during the period of the Wars of the Roses, were the Desmonds allied with the O'Neills and the O'Donnells? During the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland, the Fitzgerald Desmonds were allied to the O'Neills and the O'Donnells against the Ormonds, the Butlers in Kilkenny, fighting over the title of Lord Deputy of Ireland at the time, which pretty much, as when the Tudors come in, Henry VII comes in, he pretty much turned around to the Fitzgeralds and says, sure, you're king all but in name. That's how important the title of Lord Deputy was from my interpretation. So I'm assuming you're talking about the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. Is there anything else you guys want to elaborate
just in case, Owen, what about if you could just maybe in the 16th century during the 9 Years' War, do you want to maybe touch just in case you meant that one?
Desmond was basically gone at that stage, but O'Neill appointed the Sugaun Earl, who was he should have been the Earl of Desmond, but the father of the last Earl of Desmond, he got rid of his wife and declared his children with that wife, illegitimate. So O'Neill got this guy and he made him he appointed him Earl, which was something very scary to many Old English, because you have a Gaelic lord appointing earls. Earls are appointed by the monarch. But like Ormond stayed pro-English.
Happy days. It is just want to finish up this one. It is a great castle, though. In fairness, the Braveheart York battle was filmed outside of Trim. Yes, it was. It was probably one of the few things, looking back at now, the way they had done up Trim Castle for the movie Braveheart, which is set during the Scottish War of Independence, was absolutely magnificent. A brilliant siege. They definitely did Trim Castle more dignity than did with the clothing, which is actually fitting going into our next little topic here. Owen, is there anything you want to elaborate on these two last images?
You can jump. That's just stay there for a second. That is actually Valentia Island. It's a map from the survey of Desmond, showing how the island is actually divided between three groups of the McCarthys. Two very small ones, a slick Donald brick, and I can't remember the other one. And then where the fisheries were was held by McCarthy Moore.
I love how Derry is spelt there. That's fantastic.
Valencia is like Dublin. It has two names. And until the 17th century, the English versions alternated. Because in Irish, Valentia Island is Ilan Darrara, Island of the Oaks. Darrara was anglicized as Darrary. Valentia itself comes from Baelinsha, which is the channel between Portmagee and Valentia. So they kept changing the name. So that's Darareed or Darara.
And oopsies, 1 second. And this one here.
That's to do with O'Sullivan's. We can skip that because it's getting late.
Happy days. Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Eoin O'Neill, for everything you gave us there. On top of that as well, I just want to now switch over. And if anybody, just before Eoin has to run off there, because I know Eoin is quite busy tomorrow, so he actually has to hop off to bed.
I have to bring my daughter to the school bus.
Which is, of course, very, very important, especially when you're have to get up so early to get all those bits and bobs done. And what was it called? Michael wants to sneak away there now as well. He's more than welcome to do so, unless he
I'll stay. I'll stay for
no
Rachel.
problems. Because in this part, I just want Rachel to kind of elaborate what Eoin O'Neill was talking about. What was it, a month ago? When he was talking about Clan Tartans and stuff, and Rachel is definitely somebody who can talk about this because she loves Clan Tartans. You know, she can talk about specifically your Clan Tartan. No money joking about.
Love it.
I'm just going to have Rachel talk about the very basics of Irish clothing in the 15th century, only the very basics of it. So if you guys want to talk about clothing and stuff, you're more than welcome to do so. Eoin, I know I just want to thank you so much for all the information you provided us there. It, to me, is worth so much, especially when you get into the details of that. It's definitely really, really great stuff and everything. So as we elaborate there, Eoin, you're more than welcome to fly off there and just
I'll hang on another 15 minutes.
Happy
in the morning.
Happy days. So Eoin now is going to be parking himself in the background there. I can sneak away. So if you guys have any more questions for Eoin before he sneaks away, here's a question here I thought was quite good for myself. Why was it called the War of the Roses? It was actually, Rachel will probably correct me on this one here. In England, it is English propaganda, Tudor propaganda that popped up way later on during the period of the Elizabethan period. I'm sure that's when the name Wars of the Roses first pops up. And it was just full-on propaganda when the Tudors were rewriting history. We actually talked about this slightly when myself and Rachel were covering medieval news on Tuesday, how the Tudors had pretty much rewritten history. But Rachel had actually found evidence to indicate and show that during while it was all happening, that the Yorkists and the Lancastrians were actually rewriting the history as it was happening, to kind of alter the perspective of what was going on, to kind of favor their own agendas as it was happening. So pretty much what's going on right now with both sides of history right now, where people are actually altering history that's happening right in front of us, just for their own agenda and stuff. So it's quite interesting in that. So that's where the term pops up in English history of the term Wars of the Roses. Now, I personally use the term Ireland and the Wars of the Roses, which is I use it anytime I'm talking about the dispute in Ireland between the Fitzgeralds and Butlers between the period of the Wars of the Roses in England, because, well, just the fighting that's happening after the 100 Years' War between 1450 all the way to around, what was it? Sorry, not 1450, 1450 up to around 1490. I actually do use the term Ireland in the Wars of the Roses when I'm talking about the dispute between the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds over the title of Lord Deputy in Ireland, which kind of hits its peak of fighting. I think it's around, you guys will probably correct me on this one, around 1473 at the Battle of Piltown, when the Fitzgeralds beat the Butlers and take the title of Lord Deputy of Ireland. So that's when people use the term in Ireland, Ireland and the Wars of the Roses, it's a modern term. I think it's only the last 50 years or so that different historians have been using that term. And the reason why they call it Ireland and the Wars of the Roses is because the Fitzgeralds had connections with the Yorkists, and the Butlers had connections with the Lancastrians, and then later on with the Tudors and stuff. So that's why they kind of tie it back into English history as well. Thanks very much for all the feedback and stuff as well, guys. That means a ton to me. Is there any other questions?
Yes. So actually, I was verifying this, and I'm pretty certain this was my understanding. The term War of the Roses. We're going full circle here. Apparently, as far as I can tell, it was Sir Walter Scott who actually coined that term in the 19th century.
19th century. Oh well, there you go.
19th century.
So was he?
So not even the Elizabethans. So we're talking all part of the same period when all the rest of the history is getting bombastically romanticized, right? So as far as I can tell, it's him, and I think the novel in which there's a novel in which he coined the term, and that caught on because of course Sir Walter Scott was like the Clive Cussler of the 19th century. Like everyone read him all the time, or the Dan Brown of the 19th century. I don't know, but you know, massively popular, massively read across the entire English speaking world. So what he wrote caught on. Yeah. So that's why it's called the War of the Roses, ostensibly because one of the houses had the white roses, their sigil. The other had the red rose as their sigil. But yeah, that's why he coined that term.
Just popping over to the comment section. Why do the Irish hate the Brits?
Oh God!
If we're talking about the Wars of the Roses,
we don't have time. We don't have time for this.
If we're talking about the entire history of Irish history, no, we don't have time for that one. That's a long one. But if we're talking about the Wars of the Roses, I definitely wouldn't say the Irish hate the Brits at all. In fact, actually, here's a funny one. During the later periods of the 100 Years' War, when the Fitzgeralds have a dispute against Talbot, and technically speaking, is sort of at war with the English at the time, the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers turn around to the Fitzgeralds and they say, hey, Talbot is over in France. Do you want to go for a holiday over to England and meet my cousins and stuff? And so James, the usurper Fitzgerald, his members of his family and the Butlers go on a holiday over to England to see Butler's cousins while the Talbot is in France fighting Joan of Arc. So I wouldn't say the Irish and English hate each other, really during the period of the Wars of the Roses and stuff, to be quite honest with you. I think the relationship is quite complicated if you want to stay within the topic of the medieval era.
I will say don't be referring to Wars of Roses, this 16th century, 15th century as British. They weren't British then, so we end up going down more problematic.
There you go. So they're not even British; they're actually English.
Yeah.
Who knew? Who knew?
Well, even then, because the 100 Years' War, like, it depends on when you think ethno-nationalism and the idea of statehood and nationhood existed. Because even then, were the English then in the English Civil War, the 100 Years' War, or was it during the Industrial Revolution? Or so let's again, you're just actually what was meant to be a quick topic is just going to be deeper and deeper.
Anyway, somebody wants us to actually get back on topic again.
Back on topic.
I've heard that the Highland Games, Tartan, etc., was mostly made up by the Victorians. Do you think that opinion is wrong? Which is great, because that allows us now to elaborate onto and make that switch from Eoin over to Rachel before we elaborate too much onto nationalism during the medieval period and stuff. So first and foremost, this is a topic that myself and Rachel have actually covered a few times on what is a clan tartan. So Rachel, what's a clan tartan?
Yeah, so it's not medieval. What? So yeah, basically, what is it? Dan Breen is correct. It's a Victorian
Mm.
invention, right? It's this idea that that pattern that you see on that fabric, which we now call a tartan, but not in medieval English. Tartan does not have anything to do with multiple colored fabrics. In fact, the word tartan comes from Old French. And it was a fabric originally in the 13th century, in 13th century French, tartan, that was actually could be woven of two fibers. So you could have silk in one in the warp and cotton in the weft, or silk in the warp or linen in the weft, for instance. So it wasn't about colors, it was about mixing of fibers. And then eventually, actually, the word, because of course clerks aren't fashion experts, and so when they're documenting the fabrics in anyone's, chests as they're going through their death inventory, they might look at this fabric and like, ooh, it's really nice. Ooh, silk. We're going to call this a tartan as well, because it was associated with the idea of the Tatars being this foreign, exotic people where silk comes from, somewhere over there in the east. So that word tartan comes into Scots in the 15th century. And so if we're talking 15th century Scots, which is then it ends up coming into the Highlands that way. So it's not a Gaelic word at all. Let's just lead with that. Not a Gaelic word, and does not mean, there's no implication in the meaning of the word that it has two colors in the original definition of the word. So in the Middle Ages, it had nothing to do with being a two-colored fabric. And in fact, in Scotland even, we don't see the word tartan. It appears all over the place in Scots. Like, it's in all kinds of inventories. There are laws that are passed in the 16th centuries where you really start to see the word in Scots, tartan, in like 5 or 10 spellings, because orthography is created before the modern era. And so what you see is that it's referencing, by that point, it's referencing a pretty expensive fabric. And then eventually it starts transitioning to a fabric that's woven, mostly to a fabric that's woven of two fibers. And then by the end of the 16th century, the very end of the 16th century, we have primary source references in Scotland mentioning it in the context of multicolored. But it's not associated with any clan, with any family. There's no heraldic association with it. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. But what we do have evidence of is people all over medieval Europe wearing what we would now call tartan or plaid fabric. You have warp in one color, weft in the other color, creating some kind of striped or checkered pattern, right? And I think if you go on, I sent you some clips of fibers. So, there's our Noah's. Yeah. So here we have on the right there, and I know that's a 14th century forearm sleeve from the Thames that was excavated from the glorious muck of the Thames River. And thankfully, the river mud is pretty anaerobic, so textiles actually survive pretty well. Not much else does in the Thames River, but textiles do pretty well. And that, what you might call that a tartan, that's a merchant sleeve. A woman, probably a woman based on the dimensions, could have been a man's for a sleeve of the fitted garment that they were wearing in the 14th century called a cote, C-O-T-E. So, you've got red in one direction, you've got yellow in the other. It creates a checky pattern. It's English, not Scottish, not associated with any clan. And it's very, very, very common. And I think maybe if you maximize, or if you make the PowerPoint bigger, then we can see our bard friend there. Right. So that picture on the left, that comes from the Scotichronicon, which was written by, compiled, however you want to call what it is chroniclers in the Middle Ages actually do. He's writing in the first half of the 15th century, William Bowden. And he is writing, he's using earlier chroniclers' works and creating this massive history of Scotland, right? And that's called the Scotichronicon. It's been digitized. You can actually look through the whole thing in its original form. It's fantastic. It's got some beautiful illuminations in it. And right there is an illumination of, I think that's Alexander III of Scotland. Yeah, it's Alexander III of Scotland. And that's an Irish bard. right there in front of him. And you'll notice that neither the Irishman who's depicted there, nor any of the Scots are wearing anything like tartan. There's no plaid, there's no striped variegated fabric. It's all just fabric. So yeah, it's just, we can't prove a negative. You can't, logically, it's impossible. But you can talk about what the evidence we do have is, and the evidence we do have says that there's no clan affiliation. Now, what there is, and this is true of anywhere in Europe, there are certain dyestuffs that are more prevalent naturally in your local region, depending on what sorts of weeds just grow where you are. And so maybe where you live, there might be more woad and there might be more madder, and woad would produce blue, madder would produce red. So if you're doing homespun and you're home dyeing your hand spun fabrics, you're not going to have lots of money to import expensive dyes from other parts of Europe. So you're just going to happen to dye your thread blue and your thread red. And then when you go to weave it, you might decide, well, I'm going to do the warp in red and I'm going to do the weft in blue. But that doesn't mean that it's associated with your identity as a member of this part of Scotland, for instance.
Can I ask a question on that? Just and
yes.
Feel free. I guess this might be more speculation. So would it be, obviously the nobility are the trendsetters for any local area. So wherever the chieftains were and the nobles were, the peasants eventually were. So it's obviously the peasants are probably the ones wearing, would the peasants be the ones wearing the local weeds and woad in the area, and the nobility would be wearing imported from London, Milan, Florence, etc.
Absolutely. So what we do know, so we have, for instance, God bless Scotland, man. They have such great archives. I love the Scottish Royal Archives so much because they've digitized a lot of their expense accounts. Even though they're in Scots, there's an online Old Scots dictionary, which is really fantastic in helping me read through all of these archives. And so what we know is for certain that the Royal House of Scotland from the 15th century, 15th century is what I've looked at in this specific case. They're absolutely importing all the best from abroad. They're getting the silk damask, they're getting black velvet, which is of course the luxury of the luxury of the luxury in this era. And we know in Perth, there's been lots of excavations done in Perth and in Glasgow that have found a lot of items, even amongst we'll call them the middling sort, that are also being imported. So even the middle class in 15th century Scotland, in this particular case, are still dressing themselves in a pretty posh manner, not necessarily all in black velvet, but yeah. So I would say that the people who are wearing, more likely to be wearing, say the plaids, the mixed color fabrics, are more likely to be the people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, or people who don't have access to all the imported goods. So maybe up in the Highlands, it's more likely that you're going to see these kinds of fabrics than you would in the lowlands, and certainly more likely than you're going to see them in Edinburgh. Yeah, so definitely. But what's interesting is in the rest of Europe, for example, in Catalonia, we have donors, wealthy noble donors in the 14th century. Did I send those, Phil? Did I send the Catalan donors kneeling in their plaid?
These ones here?
Keep going. I don't know why I sent you that one. I have no idea. Nope. Okay. I sent you the wrong picture. That's okay. There's this fantastic 14th century altarpiece with the donors depicted in the wings in Catalonia. And the man, the Lord, he is depicted in a coat of plaid. So apparently, at least as of the 14th century, that is still a fashionable color, even amongst the nobility on mainland Europe. So it seems that my suspicion is that as the textile industry became ever more advanced, more complex, there are advances made in the weaving technology that allow them to produce even more of these luxurious fabrics for less cost. Then those fabrics become more popular amongst the aristocrats by the 15th century, thereby increasingly relegating these mixed color fabrics to the lower classes. So yeah, I think it would be fair to say that as the centuries wear on, you know, as we're getting into the 16th century, for instance, you definitely don't see aristocrats depicted in these mixed color fabrics anymore. Not anywhere.
It's again, maybe it's just we ponder on it or think about it. So if the nobility or the clan hierarchy, chiefs, etc., are not wearing the local dyes, do we like? Does that again? Is that another nail in the coffin of Clan Tartans? Since
yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so if you're right, if the chieftain, in quotes here, I'm going to use the term that you know, a lot of people would use, whether it's correct or not is a different question. But if the chieftain is not wearing the clan tartan, then how? Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. Absolutely, and I agree that probably, you know, we do know from household accounts, even from some of the Highland families, we do know that they had means, they had money, and so that the lord of the clan could absolutely afford some of these luxury items and is probably not wearing homespun with any kind of regularity. Now, for workaday clothes, and 15th century especially, even the aristocrats are still doing some pretty menial tasks, especially in the more remote regions where you maybe don't have the massive labor force that you have in Central Europe, for instance. So, you know, even the aristocrats had work clothing. And we know that from the expense accounts, that they actually talk about the queen's coat, very worn indeed, for instance. So COTE, coat, it's the 15th century word. Anyway, yeah, so we know that it's likely that they could have had these clothes made of that kind of fabric in their possession. But as you say, that's kind of another nail in the coffin for, is this a clan tartan if the lord isn't wearing it as a symbol of his identity? Which, yeah, there's just no evidence of any kind of that plaid fabric, as we now call it, being identified with any particular lineage. And that's literally invented. It is, we know the point at which it's invented in the 19th century. So
because the closest, from my understanding, and Rachel's more than welcome to correct me on this one, is the closest thing we can get to what people refer to as clan colors or clan tartan and all that stuff is those, as I said a dozen times, and Rachel's more than welcome to correct me on this one, is what we refer to as these crisp belts that you can see here. Can you guys see all that? The crisp belt. That's, from my understanding, that's the closest that we can get to as clan, you know, clan colors or clan tartans and stuff. And this belt was worn between fishermen, and also was worn by Gaelic mercenary companies in Ireland around since their arrival in the 14th century as war bands, and as they become Gaelic mercenary companies and stuff going into the 15th century. This is a belt that they would have worn to distinguish themselves on the battlefield. Not perfect, as Connor has pointed out a million times. When you're on the battlefield, it is actually quite difficult to tell the difference between one clan and the other, just trying to go off of belts alone, especially when they get covered in mud and blood. And this is how we end up having MacSweeney's chopping up opposite rival MacSweeney groups. Or even chopping up their own MacSweeneys accidentally on the battlefield, because it's hard to distinguish just going off belts alone. But from my interpretation, this does seem to be the closest thing we have to clan colors or clan belts. But that's my interpretation.
Right. Yeah. It's and you know, it's funny because I haven't. The visual record for medieval Irish clothing is pretty pauce, and it's frustratingly unclear in many places. I haven't seen any depictions of those kinds of belts in any of the visuals that I've seen depicting either Irish visuals, like Irish depicting Irish, or foreigners depicting Irish. Obviously, foreigners depicting Irish are more suspect to not be accurate than the Irish depicting Irish.
Like it makes sense for them to have some kind of belt to be able to distinguish themselves when they're both on the battlefield, or just because these belts are literally just taken from fishermen, you know, people going out fishing and then they fall
Yeah.
into the water. And this is, by the way, not unique to Ireland and Scotland. They're using the same belts in Scandinavia. It could be even something that was brought over from Norway into Scotland and Ireland, for all we know. But it was used if a fisherman had fallen into the water and then his body eventually comes onto the coastal area, then a opposite village, fishing village, or any village, for instance, who finds his body could turn around and says, oh, actually, I recognize that belt. That belt is from so-and-so village down the road. Or somebody will eventually be able to identify that belt and then return that person back to where they originated from. And that's where we get these sort of, as people refer to them as kind of clan colors or clan belts. That's kind of the closest thing we have, like.
Right. Which, by the way, what you just described is what we call dog tags in the military.
Literally what they are like.
It is exactly the medieval version of dog tags. It's kind of a disturbing thought, actually. So what you've got depicted up there actually is a controversial set of clothing. This was found in County Sligo.
Your favorite place.
And basically this outfit could date anywhere from the 15th century all the way to the 17th century, and they apparently haven't bothered to carbon date it, so God knows why. It's a bog body, you know. God bless the Irish for just always falling in bogs fully clothed. It's they've done history a great service. Thank you for your sacrifice.
I'm not going to elaborate on that.
Whether that's a literal thing or not.
Right.
Michal, at this point, I'm not elaborating on that.
Right. But what we see there are what he's wearing on his legs. Those are called trews in medieval English. Yeah.
I've lost the joke. Where's it gone? Oh yeah, there you
go.
Where did it go?
Fionn saying about the Scots, can they not just wear
silly
trews?
jocks just wear trews? Oh yeah.
I was waiting to use that one because I knew eventually you'd say it and I could set it off.
Yeah, so those are called trews, and what's interesting about them is that they combine what on mainland Europe were called, well, in English were called hosen, or chausse in French, or calze in Italian. That's the part that just covers the leg up to the thigh where it ends in a point. And then it's sewn onto, whip stitched onto breeches, right? And so thereby making what we might call trousers. But it's something that in the 15th century, no one was wearing in mainland Europe anymore. They were wearing hosen and breeches as a separate thing. But the style, that bias cut, you can tell it's bias cut because of the way the pattern is going like this, right? So literally they cut it across the grain so that it would have stretch, because a square like this in the weave doesn't have any stretch, but if you rotate it, then suddenly the diamond can collapse on itself and you get that bias cut stretch. So that's why it has that interesting diagonal pattern. It's not woven that way, it's cut that way. But that style of cutting on the bias is like so gone in the rest of Europe by the 17th century. They're just using knit stockings. They have knitting. You don't need to cut things on the bias anymore to make it fit. So that's why I kind of lean towards this more being a 15th century find. But either way, people look at that and say, oh, look, it's a typical Irish clan plaid or Irish clan tartan. No, it's just homespun. It's just homespun wool. That's it.
And just popping back over to what I would consider clan colors. Interesting one here. To be honest with you, I always just called it a Chris belt. What was it? CRISS. A Chris belt is what a lot of people within my circle of reenactments and stuff would refer to it as. And it was first and foremost just used by fishermen. So fishermen got lost in the sea. what was it called? They'd be able to identify them easy enough. And then, from my understanding, as Connor from the Celtic Templar had elaborated on, the Galloglass also used it from around the the 13th century, from their arrival from the Isles and stuff, when they first came onto the battlefields and stuff, during the Brian O'Neill's revolt. They actually used it. They would have it on themselves, and they would use it on the battlefield and stuff to be able to identify themselves, the difference between the McSweeneys and various other, like the O'Donnells and stuff. So the O'Donnells and McSweeneys, those clans would have different crisp belts, and those, even on top of that, they originate from fishing belts. So they weren't used per se as, what was it called, clan belts per se at the start, or as used on the battlefield. They just started, it just kind of makes sense. If you're using it for fishing and you want to identify yourself on the battlefield, why not use it on the battlefield as well? And then over time, it just sort of becomes, I suppose, a clan belt in itself, because it's then identifying the likes of the McSweeneys, the O'Donnells, the McCartys, so on and so forth on the battlefield, so they'll be able to identify each other rather than chopping each other up. But it's not perfect. As Conor has pointed out, we do actually have examples from the 15th century where when it ends up getting covered in blood and mud, they find it very difficult to be able to tell the difference between each other. So McSweeneys end up chopping up other McSweeneys, O'Donnells end up chopping up other O'Donnells. So it's not perfect, but this is basically the closest thing we have to clan colors, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, that's basically it. There's, you can't prove a negative, but you can talk about what the evidence says, and the evidence says that plaids are a medieval European thing, not a Irish or a Scottish thing, and that there's no affiliation of any kind of official recognizable nature between this pattern equals this family.
Again, I normally put them in the same category as coats of arms, in the fact that if a family wants to get behind it as a symbol of their claimed heritage, but again, I think, like say, they need to come with that sort of evidence that it is a modern thing to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Don't try and attach it to some sort of ancient antiquity that doesn't exist. So yeah, I'm very interested about that. Actually, I've got a quick question, and it's not about Tartan. So are you finished? Unless someone's got questions, because I've got a question that's come up there from Fionn, and I was wondering, but I don't want to interrupt you, Rachel, if you're in the middle of
Oh no, I think that it was supposed to be quick. It wasn't supposed to be a 3-hour presentation, so.
I think as long as we have 4 people on, and you end up with extra time. But I always wondered, have you ever researched my old regiment was the Royal Irish Regiment on the British Army, and we had something called a corbeen. Now, I was always told that this meant shapeless hat, and it was something that may have links to the 17th century. But I always wondered if you'd ever had a look into that, and if you knew anything.
Let me see what it looks like. I can probably tell you if I can.
You'd have to type in Royal Irish Corbeen. The spelling there is Finn has the spelling there, the Corbeen. So Royal Irish Corbeen.
I think it's double E instead of EAN, but
yeah, okay, got it. Oh, that beret looking thing.
No, don't call it a beret. Right, hang up. Hang up.
Yeah, right. So my husband's an officer in the U.S. Army, and he has a beret that looks real similar. Anyway, yeah. So the origins of that. So I have seen that style of hat in the 17th century. Yeah, that is, but not in Ireland. Not just in Ireland, rather. Like I've seen it in England too, in English depictions, and Scottish pictures of Scottish noblemen wearing something of that style. So it would not surprise me if it's the British who introduced that actually to the Irish regiment as part of their uniform.
kind of becomes a blur at that point between, because at the time around that period as well, is that there's a sudden old switcheroo where for a very long time the British were insanely anti-Celtic, and then suddenly Queen Victoria suddenly gets this big massive fetish for anything Celtic. In fact, she's running around with a big Tara brooch at this point, and she's actually like we literally in Ireland refer to her as the famine queen, as very anti-Irish, when in fact Queen Victoria just suddenly, she even gets herself, I can't remember, a Scottish boyfriend as well, who runs around in a kilt.
Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown.
She's also the only other signatory on the Book of Armagh as well. With Brian Boru. So you know, it's you know, yes, but I think there's you know, you can love things about the culture but not the people, and there's many a symbol we can point to.
That's very, very true. I won't go too much into
valid point. We'll say that, and we'll
I was about to say that because God, that's a hot topic there. It's not medieval. That's the main thing. Anyway, the Corby's not medieval.
It is not. No, it is not medieval. I've definitely no pre-17th century evidence of it. Is what I'll say. Right? I always like to phrase it that way. Like, I have not seen visual evidence of such a cap before the 17th century in Ireland.
Okay, so before we move away from the topic of Irish clothing in the 15th century and stuff, do you guys have any other questions on 15th century clothing, or can we find any questions here in the because I know I'm dealing with like not just the questions from my side, but I'm also have other questions here. Do you guys see any questions to do with clothing or stuff in the medieval period, specifically on the medieval period?
Well, actually, so there's an interesting one from Peter MacDonald. Any examples of ceremonies involving the exchange of clothing between chiefs and vassals, which that comes with several levels of answer. So actually, I don't know if we really addressed that in any clear way. Just the idea of chiefs in these medieval Irish clans, is that even really a concept?
That's Melissa's field, Melissa Shields. She's doing a whole load of study onto that one. I am right now trying to get her on, but she right now actually is doing a whole load of research. She has one or two of her talks online. If you go to Clans of Ireland on YouTube, one of her talks on gift giving in the 16th century is on that. So type in Melissa Shields, and she has a few YouTube videos on right now, especially if you go on to Clans of Ireland. She has a video up right now on gift giving culture in Ireland. So it is there, and Melissa Shields also specializes in clothing in Ireland. I don't know if she has released a paper or anything yet on that topic, because it is a humongous topic, and Melissa has only started that in the last, I suppose, 10 years now. She's studying that. So that's still a developing research right now. So I'll actually have to get a hold of Melissa and poke and prod her. I'm actually good friends with her, so I'll see what I can do and see if we can get her on. But right now, she's very, 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 very busy doing her research over in university. Last time I checked on her, she was on University College of Cork. So I don't know that one specifically. Michal, do you know any examples of that?
So the only thing I can think of, the only part I've extensively, I've done some enough research to comment on is Robert the Bruce's. A lot of his gifts are recorded before, during, and after the Battle of Bannockburn. The only problem with it is that little to no Gaelic families, or before Gaelic, so Gaelic families are mentioned in any of the gift givings or receivings, and it's all happening within the Norman, the South Scotland sphere, and the that sort of gentry. So we don't actually, I know from a Scottish context around the 13th century, there's not a lot of evidence of what the gifts are between, because we don't think they mirror each other. They're not. It's not going to be the exact same, especially around this time when you have the McDonald's really going like really Irish, and they're really trying to link themselves to, they're making their paternal ancestor Smarly. He's obviously, who we know now is probably a Norse father, Irish mother. They're trying to make him an Irish, paternal Irish, and we have Moray having its connections to Ireland, so they're looking towards Ireland and not Scotland. So is that in the same aspect as in the way that they view gift giving? Are they wanting to mimic Ireland? So what I'm saying, it goes back to the point of, I know it sounds like I'm not answering it to any person out there, but what I'm saying is that there's too many things happening for us to. It's not being written by the Scottish in the Isles. They're not writing anything at this time. So we have no idea, but the people surrounding them are possibly doing different things. So it depends really which way they're looking onto which way they're doing it. So yeah, unfortunately, it's just one of those things that's just not well recorded.
You see,
so
sorry, Rachel.
So I was going to say, ceremonies are sometimes in the medieval period, ceremonies are sometimes recorded so well that you could literally reenact it because they leave you a script, say coronations. But other kinds of ceremonies, for instance, a ceremony of an exchange of gifts, or just even the lord, the chief, giving his vassal, his retainer livery. That's the medieval English word for clothing that is given to your people. That tends not to be recorded very well, and I'm not personally familiar. I have not encountered any such ceremonies documented in the 14th or 15th century in Ireland myself. Not specifically for clothing. So if you're looking like the actual ceremony itself, I can't say that I have not seen. My research has not led me down any avenues, because I'm a big pomp and circumstance girl. Like, give me a good ceremony, please. Yes, please. But I haven't found anything detailed enough that you could actually say this is the ceremony.
You see, the problem is, what was it called? Clothing does become a powerful symbol from 1366 onwards with the Statutes of Kilkenny, because from that point onwards, if you're attending Irish Parliament, you have to be dressed in English clothing, and that includes the Gaelic. So you do have examples, especially going into the 16th century, which are quite funny, where you have Gaelic chieftains going into Parliament dressed in English clothing. And we do get this expression of them hating their clothing, because they'll leave the English Parliament afterwards and they'll literally strip and take off their English clothing, which they're supposed to wear like all the time, because the statutes like the Statutes of Kilkenny and various other statutes that are brought in during the 16th century are meant to ban you from wearing Gaelic clothing. But we are somewhat aware of, because of complaints, that Gaelic chieftains are going into Parliament, doing their job, and then once they leave their parliament and go back into their territory again, literally stripping off their their English clothing, and getting them back into their savage, wild Irish clothing again. So it does become kind of a symbol. You see, this is where I can't remember any examples itself, but I'm sure Henry VIII then starts gifting people English clothing to start kind of encouraging Gaelic people to start wearing more English clothing and less Gaelic clothing. And that's why I kind of don't want to kind of confirm it until I get Melissa on to kind of get those references in there.
I believe the image you showed up with the individual in a Irishman in a blue cloak.
Yeah, the bard right behind you.
Yeah, this man here.
No, that one. No, it's not. It's up.
Not that one. Oh, the other one. Yeah. No. I know which one you're talking
about. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I believe that is that is meant to be an Irish. It is an Irish woman wearing English clothing in the 16th, 17th century. I believe that is meant to be an interpretation. If I remember correctly, that is meant to represent the fact that I believe in Munster as well, and that's the area that it's linked to, is that in Munster people were starting, there were Irish women were starting to wear English fashion.
Well, that's a Dutchman who documents
yes.
that. So but as that is definitely not English clothing.
Oh right. Well, I might have got
that.
That might have got
not even slightly. That is very Irish. Like that's very unique to Ireland. That is so not. There's like literally like nothing else in Europe except the closest thing it's close to is actually late 15th century Castilian fashions.
I love that.
It's closer to that than to anything else.
I'm sure. I might have mistook it for. There's a few drawings online that are very similar in style. I will get it up at some point. But I believe there's a document very similar to that, and it's showing women in. Well, I think it's Owen who was actually the one that did the thing on it. Where is he?
There's actually, so there in the later 16th century, there are definitely depictions of Irish women. I've seen they're at a feast, and they are definitely dressed in a much more English fashion. I've definitely seen that.
Because
go wake up.
Yeah, like I do believe that outfit there is Irish. It's a Gaelic outfit, and we do have Gaelic women dressing Gaelic, especially when you had the arrival of the Spanish up around Youghal and stuff, and Kildare. You have Spanish ambassadors and stuff going inside there, and they record about Gaelic women in Gaelic dress and stuff. So I do believe that is in Gaelic dress. However, as Rachel said as well, they are also dressing in English because Gaelic women, I say Gaelic, I'll just umbrella term them all under Irish because it's such a blur anyway. And that's the Fitzgerald's women who literally go between the Gaelic world of dressing Gaelic, as we can see with references from the Spanish, but then when they're going to French and English court, or even sometimes over to Italy as well, you do actually have Fitzgerald's women who are taking on the fashion of the English, the Tudor English, when they go over to, what was it called, England and France and stuff as well. So they are going between the two of them. It's not like that's not happening. Like,
yeah. But I mean, this is 16th century, and so much changes about Irish fashion in the 16th century. I mean, it's drastic. But there's drastic changes across fashion across all of Europe, so it's not surprising. This is also the rise of the nation states, right? So this is where the states start to consolidate, and you start to get a sort of national costume that wasn't really there before. That idea was not really very prominent.
What I found very interesting, what you were saying, and obviously, Rachel, you can correct me on saying this one, but I think you were saying before is Gaelic women's clothing was considered barbaric because it was loose compared to European clothing that was more fine fitting. Am I correct in saying that?
Are you talking to me?
Sorry.
No. So it's really funny. What it's not so much that it's loose. So for example, there's that Viscount from Catalonia who goes to St. Patrick's Purgatory at the end of the 14th century. He goes on pilgrimage, and he documents his journey he visits the court of Tyrone and the king of Tyrone, in quotes, his interpretation of the political situation there. And he meets the king and the queen, in quotes, and he meets their court. And what he says is that everyone is naked, but then he goes on to describe all the clothes they're wearing. So what the implication is that they're not wearing the same number of layers as people on the continent are, right? And we have that same idea of nakedness not being modernly naked. There's a court case in England from the 15th century. A woman is abducted, and he's brought to trial, and the court case says the Margaret so-and-so was abducted all naked, wearing her smock and kirtle. So the implication is that if you're just wearing the two bottom layers, the thing against your skin, and then the fitted laced over dress over top of that, that still counts as naked. right? So it's not so much in some cases, yeah, it could be a question that they're not as fitted as he thinks is appropriate, or that it's just not enough layers.
Finn has a very good question here as well. When you say English clothing, does that just mean up-to-date Renaissance clothing?
Yeah, so I would say the fashions that are in fashion in that moment. So if it's English clothing in 1450, then it's 1540, then it's English clothing that is fashionable in that moment. Because yes, the Irish are bizarrely both innovative and conservative. So the Irish will adopt every new thing that comes down the pipeline. But at the same time, they'll kind of say, but I really like my great-great-grandmom's dress too. So I'm going to keep wearing that. But I'm also going to want to wear this new innovative high fashion item that I just got. So that's what makes it hard to date some of these clothing finds, because they may look very old, but they might not be old, or vice versa. So yeah, there's a gown that was found in Moy. Am I saying that right?
No,
MOY. Yeah. Okay. It's called the Moy gown. It was found in a bog, like all the other clothes we have. It was found in a bog, and they haven't carbon dated it yet. I guess Ireland, the Irish museums must not have large budgets for this. They haven't carbon dated it.
We'll get a hold of them, listen, we'll find out what the crack is, because Chris would actually know that one.
Yeah, no, but they haven't carbon dated it yet. They still haven't carbon dated it yet, right? So it looks, for all intents and purposes, if you compare it to what's going on the continent or in England, it looks just like a 14th or 15th century gown, right? What's left of it, because it only survived like down, only this much survived. So you don't have a whole dress, but and from the way it's constructed, it's very 15th century. But then some people are saying, well, yeah, but in Ireland, they would sometimes keep making things the same way for decades or even hundreds of years. So maybe it's from the 16th or the 17th century. Carbon dating would really help there. But that Moy gown, my point is that Moy gown, go to the Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Noah's Ark slide.
Yeah. There we go.
Oh, why is it so bad? Why are they so weirdly
shaped? The PowerPoint?
Why is it warped? It's weirdly warped. Okay, yeah, make it a little big again. It looks less bad that way. So basically, the Moy gown would actually create. This is the Book of Ballymote, and it dates to like 1401 or something like that. So the way the men and the women are. These are all Noah. This is Noah and his family, by the way. In 15th century Ireland. The way their garments, the men and the women, the garments are fitted on their body. This dress would result in that shape for both the men and the women. So we know for a fact that they are definitely wearing nicely fitted garments in the Irish parts, the Gaelic parts of Ireland, right? In the 14th and 15th century. So yeah, it's not necessarily, but you look at these people, and I could not distinguish them from, say, people in Germany in this era. Well, a couple of decades before that, actually, except for the fact that they're kind of out of fashion for their decade. That's the way people were dressing, in, say, Germany in the 1350s to 1370s. So, otherwise, there's nothing particularly Irish about that versus what's happening on the continent, except for maybe the beards. They've got some, but they're supposed to be Noah and his family. So who knows if the artist gave them beards like that?
I'm just thinking about the crowns, because obviously we don't really have any.
Crowns are very debatable. Crowns are because I heard Sean Duffy turn around and say there were no crowns in Ireland at the time, but according to the English at the battle, there's a battle that happens in around. Where was it again? Around 936. There's a battle that happens in England, and the English define all of the Irish kings. I mean, both the Dublin kings and the Gaelic that are in there as all having crowns on their heads. So it's constantly debatable.
Balabambra.
Yeah, that's the one.
No, but that's. I'm pretty sure there's a thing about that. It's just like that's a bit like this interpretation of like. That's their, and they're just doing that to because that's their interpretation of a king. King has a crown, even though, you know. So yeah, there's no because I remember this started with Brian Bruce's supposed crown that went to the Vatican, and obviously I don't think the Vatican even have a record of it. And they're pretty good at keeping records, unless I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm not just. I had to stop myself. Right. Anyway. But yes. So I was just very surprised to see a crown on an individual's head, and I wonder if that's more because it's religious. So they represent.
It is. It's supposed to be Noah, right? So in the medieval mindset, Noah is a kind of king, right? Like he's a patriarch, right? So he's a king. It must be. I'm pretty certain it has less to do with what Irish kings may have been wearing in this era versus he's a patriarch. He's got to have a crown, like, you know. Otherwise, without a crown, he's just any old bloke, right? Like.
And also, you guys were saying about beards as well. If we look, I don't know about the 15th century. I think the 15th century is very, very funny. But if we're looking into early medieval history, there's constant quotations in both Welsh literature and also in Irish literature that to define yourself as a manly man, you had to have a big, strong beard. So that could be why maybe in the 15th century it's still kind of reflecting itself that, you know, the difference between a man and a woman is that a man has a big manly beard. Maybe that's what's going on in the 15th century. But even on top of that, I think it could be quite debatable, especially when you're dealing with the southeast of the country where they perhaps were taking on more fashion of, you know, the way that they were doing goatees, as you were saying there. In Europe and stuff, especially if you're dealing with the likes of James the Usurper Fitzgerald and also what was his name, Seamus the White Earl Butler, who maybe took on more of the European style of beards, but very, very, very debatable inside there. But actually here, maybe this guy will give us our answer, because they don't really have beards and they're meant to be Gaelic, bum, 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 bum. And this is also around the 15th century as well, isn't it? Your bard has a beard though, so
so that's like that's 1440s is when this the bard has a beard. So we do know that Irishmen in 15th century Ireland absolutely had nice flowing beards, because we have tomb effigies. There's one of a tailor. One of my favorite ones from the mid 15th century depicts a tailor kneeling, and he's got this just gorgeous thick flowy, like there's beard envy just surrounding him for anyone who looks at this man. And so we definitely know that the Irish were definitely sporting some pretty nicely groomed beards in the 15th century. But also there are sumptuary laws that the English pass that actually say that the English have to keep clean shaven to distinguish them from the Irish.
See, I was just thinking that, especially if the Irish are supposed to be going into the Irish Parliament or any form of assembly to do with the English or stuff, would they have to shave their? Because it does seem to indicate
not the Irish. The English are told they have to shave. No. See, this people misunderstand the statutes of Kilkenny, maybe through their biases. But I went back and looked at them, and it's not about we're controlling the Irish. It's about distinguishing the Irish from the English. They don't want to make the Irish like the English. They don't want that. And they actually specifically, one of the statutes actually says specifically, because the Irish are dressing like the English and the English are dressing like the Irish, both ways, we can no longer tell the difference between them. And now there are apparently Irish bandits who are dressing in the English style and getting up to mischief. By getting into the pale because they look English, and then they're engaging in banditry. And so the statutes specifically say that Englishmen must shave every 2 weeks.
But basically, the problem I have with that then is because it's such a massive blur, not so much in the northwest of the country, but in the southeast of the country. Because if you've got the likes of the Fitzpatricks, for example, like technically speaking, they're supposed to be Gaelic, but yet they're constantly running around declaring that they are English, you know? So I think it's definitely a blur, especially going into the statutes of Kilkenny, as you point out there, with English bandits, Gaelic dressing as English bandits and running around causing a muck. And also on top of that as well, the likes of the Fitzpatricks who are disguising themselves as English to get around certain situations and stuff. It seems to be difficult to pin down, when it comes down to the statutes of Kilkenny. Okay, so who goes into the... I know it sounds so easy. If you're ethnically English, then you must be English. Or if you're ethnically Gaelic, then you must be Gaelic. But in fact...
And it does,
there seems to be people who put on the old wolf clothing and just going into the Irish Parliament. Sorry, the Irish Parliament anyway. And if they're sneaking into the Irish Parliament, are they then shaving and playing by the rules to define themselves as English? Because Galway is another very good example of that. Galway is as Gaelic can be, but even in letters, they're just like, well, if the word being civilized is English, then hey, look, we're English because we're civilized. Like how do they play the game and stuff when they're going into the likes of Irish Parliament and stuff, or very
well, they do. I mean, there are some laws put in to stop the Irish coming into the city at times. And also, it's funny as well because you also have Irish families trying to prove that they're not Irish. They're going to court to become recognized as English, coming up with these fabricated genealogies that they're actually from, an English sailor who came across, 1,000 years ago, whatever. So they, so there's a lot of. Which I would say is a very Irish thing to do, especially since we've been editing our genealogies for thousands of years. So by going to court, I automatically said he was Irish. So I mean, it just really shows how blurred it all is.
Massively, because this is why I constantly, when it comes down to the 15th century, I use the term Anglo-Irish rather than Norman or just plain English, because there's other people then that would say, oh, well, that's English and this is English and that's English. And it's not. It's a complete and utter blur, depending on how the Irish feel on that specific hour of that day. It's like, well, today I feel English. And then an hour later, they're like, well, I've always been Gaelic. I don't know what you're talking about,
what is beneficial
exactly
in the moment, right?
That's how I feel when I'm reading these sources, especially when you're dealing with the likes of the Fitzgeralds. It's like, well, I was always civilized English. I don't know what you're talking about. And the next hour is like, I hate the Tudors. I was never English. I don't know what you're talking about.
I get it. Like, I'm from Northern Ireland, right? We're either British or Irish. We get to pick, and I'll pick whatever suits me best at the time.
I want my social welfare money.
Look, I'm just keeping up the age-old tradition. That's all it is.
That's right. Exactly. Nothing new under the sun, my friends.
This is a good one off Seamus there. From my understanding, Seamus, nipple licking lasted between both.
We're about to get demonetized.
I want to talk about it. I'm already demonetized. It doesn't matter to me. What was it called? Nipple licking lasted between the Bronze Age with bog finds that we have all the way over to about 550, and then from 550 onwards, it seems to be what was it called? As a way of kind of introducing yourself, or being I suppose submissive to your overlord, you would lick his nipple, and that lasts, from my understanding, from the Bronze Age all the way up to around 550. And then with the Christianization of the island of Ireland, the Christian kings preferred to be baptized. So if you were being subjugated, instead of licking his nipple, he would rather you just ducked your head into the water there and be, baptized under him. So that became the new form of subjugation, from my understanding of the literature, from 550 onwards. Is there any, Michal or Rachel, is there anything else you want me to elaborate on that, or elaborate on as well, when it comes down to subjugation and stuff?
I honestly, when I saw that question, I thought that was being cheeky.
No, it really is a thing. Are you judging my culture? Are you not going to take part later? No. Ryan's watching this, going, "What are they doing?"
Oh my God. Wow. Of all the fascinating ways of showing submission, that's an interesting, that's a choice.
Well,
I don't know why they got rid of it in 550. Like what happened?
Should we take a
no,
knee? Now we're going to lick each other's nipples.
As far as I was aware, it was a myth.
Mm.
I know Patrick records it happening.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure there are people out there who disagree with this interpretation and think it's maybe one of a couple of things. Maybe the boys are winding him up because he's obviously having to lick his nipples together. So they think it's maybe something there. Just
you think it's hazing?
Yeah.
You think it's historical hazing?
Yeah, not just me. This is one of the theories. There's another.
No. Wow.
And
that's great.
It's just the Irish, just random Christian ones on their boat, and they're just like, go on in, boy. I mean, to be fair, like it could have been worse. There's just there's also other theories that it's maybe St. Patrick being a bit trying to demonize the old Irish compared to his new Irish with Christianized.
I mean, I'll be honest. That sounds really plausible as a way of demonizing anyone.
There's nothing wrong with licking a bit of nipples there in subjugation. Nothing wrong with it, Other people get, kiss a ring. Other people give a bit of tribute. But I don't think there was anything wrong with sucking a little bit of nipples, Are we demonetized yet?
Oh my God! So it was St. Patrick who wrote about this.
I believe yes. He's one of the ones I believe is when he gets on the boat supposedly from Waterford to mainland, he begs to get on the boat. I believe the sailor, the captain, says, "Have an old lick there."
Yeah. This is in the thing. What you call it? If you read, what was it? His confessio. He literally confesses that this happened in the confessio. And what else is in there? So there is other boys who allegedly licked the captain's nipples, and then on top of that as well, Patrick gets away with it because he's Christian. The captain's like, "Oh, you're a Christian. That's grand. You don't have to." So he lets him on scot-free. And then the problem is then, so first and foremost, we do question if this happened because it's written by Christians. So all the literature then is written by Christians. But on saying that, Bronze Age bog bodies all the way up to around 550, they all, for some strange reason, any nobles that have been discovered or found, they have their nipples cut off. So it's like, okay, so why are they mutilating all these nipples? Like, why are they cutting them off? So it could be the fact that they are as a form of subjugation, licking each other's nipples. And then after 550 onwards, subjugation changes to you be baptized. So they would, once you went to your supreme leader, and as part of also giving them cattle tribute, they would also bring you over to the river and dunk your head in. So it's not only a form of because you also have a form of execution as well. So a form of subjugation would, be baptizing the person in subjugation, but also on top of that as well, we have a lot of people being executed through drowning as well. So Turgus, for example, who didn't submit to male Shocknall the first, he eventually grabs his head and dunks it into the water and drowns him as well. So you see it as both of a form of execution and as a form of submission through baptizing the person, cleansing that person's soul, not just as a form of, let me see, how do I word this? It's the fact, because in your life, you may, in the early medieval period, both in Britain and in Ireland, you may actually, as a Christian, be baptized multiple times. But it's the fact of who is baptizing you, puts you under their kind of clan or warband or whatever it is. Does that makes all sense?
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Okay.
Oh my God, I'm so glad that question was asked. I feel so enriched.
Don't judge my culture.
Oh, it's a great comment here. It's funny how this has never made it into any movies.
It should do.
Not the kind that I watch anyway.
That's it. Again, the anti-Irish, you know. So.
Oh my god!
If a man can't lick another man's nipple,
I don't know why they got rid of it. Like, what was the problem here? Like, baptizing is just not as good. Like, put your head in. That was it. Just, Christ, so boring.
Philip, is there another streaming platform we can go on to where we can do this?
Elaborate. I actually know the one.
It's called OnlyFans.
I don't know if we can say that one, but Yeah. It's a special Patreon page. Although Patreon is live streaming now as well.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, Patreon's got it all now. They're trying desperately to get people to stop using YouTube as the loading platform, basically. Yeah.
Which is great because I have a Patreon where I do classes every Sunday, so we'll hint, covering Normans right now, but we can easily talk about Bronze Age Ireland again if enough Patreons jump on.
So good comment. The English court, not just the British court, the English court had the groom of the stool. That's far more lewd. Actually, all by the 15th century, pretty much everyone had a groom of the stool. And it was actually a job you wanted because it put you right into the power. Like you are the most intimate and most directly connected to the sovereign you can be. That's private time when you get to actually like have one-on-one chats with the crown. So talk about power and influence. It's not a lewd job. It was a highly coveted job. Now, granted, if you had to wipe the king's butt, well,
we got rid of nipples. Now we got this.
Power and privilege comes with its price, my friends.
Sounds like an amazing job. Like, sorry, say that again. Why did we get rid of nipple licking?
They got sore nipples because they didn't have nipple cream like mothers do these days, like nursing mothers do.
Yeah. That's probably true. Now I think about it, that's probably why Ireland's the least lactose place in Europe, like lactose intolerant place in Europe. Maybe that's why.
Right.
And now the fake history comes full circle.
I guaranteed I've actually missed a good few questions in there. So guys, if you want us to cover any questions before we pop away, definitely comment below. I think is there anything else we need to cover? Because I think we covered pretty much everything else we need to do. Obviously it was a massive pleasure. I don't know if Owen's actually going to watch the re-recording of this. If he does, thank you, Owen, so much. There's your references as well, Owen, and a few other references there as well. I don't know if anybody can make it out because it's kind of funny using it on this platform, but there you go anyway. And of course, Michal, thank you so much for jumping on there as well and helping us with today. Your deep knowledge of the clans and dynasties of Ireland is always really, really welcomed in here. We obviously, you can jump on whenever you want and we can cover other topics and stuff, especially to do with Ireland and Scotland. And Rachel, once again, thank you so much for your deep knowledge to do with clothing in 15th century Europe, especially to do with Ireland and Scotland, to do with tartans and stuff like that. I hope if anybody's looking to buy a clan tartan or anything like that, myself and Michael don't have something to do. Michael, we should switch from t-shirts to Chris belts. We should definitely switch over to this one because we might actually make more money on this one, because especially since that's pretty much the closest thing we have to clan colors or clan anything really. So we might as well switch the business over to that, Michal. Start making money there. Does anybody have any requests for any clan belts, Dia? I go and get a leather belt there for you. I have one here actually. I'll sell this online here. That's the colors for Clan Hayes, right? So if anybody wants a Clan Hayes belt, there you go. I'll sell it for $250 there. I'll send it over to you in post.
$250.
I'll sell it because we still
Oh
have
my
that
God.
what's it called, business up and running, the t-shirt business, don't we, Michal?
Yeah. I haven't looked at for bloody ages. You've probably got a fortune in there.
Yeah. The more books that we need to bloody buy, you need to start looking back into that as well. So we actually do have a Clans and Dynasties and Irish Medieval t-shirt shop on the go there. We set up like, what was it, 4 years ago or something?
Oh, wow. This. So Philip, you and I have been collaborating for almost a year, and this is the first time.
I know, right?
Yeah, but I haven't checked the account on it for like 2 years, so there could be money in there. We did used to earn on it, so it could be interesting. I do know if we disappear, we actually earn a lot.
Yeah. Successful business.
We're off to enjoy each other's nipples.
Here. We have to pay for that one. What was it called? I think that's pretty much it. If you guys don't have any other questions with that, thank you so much, guys. Obviously, tomorrow. No. What day is it today? It's sometime. I think it's Wednesday. It's only Thursday.
Thursday. Wait, no,
yeah, it's
Thursday.
Yeah,
it's Thursday.
On Sunday night for you guys, well, it's Wednesday night for them right now. On Sunday night for you guys, I'll be covering a class over on the Patreon to do with the Norman invasion of Ireland. I'm literally at the very start of the Norman invasion of Ireland. So if you head on over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History, it's only about 20 quid a month. Actually, since YouTube isn't paying me right now, it's the only way I'm getting paid right now. So if you want to support the channel, definitely head over to my Patreon and support me there. Rachel, what do you have ongoing?
Oh yeah, today's Thursday, right? Let's reaffirming. Tomorrow is Friday. I'm going to be doing medieval cooking in the modern kitchen as a live stream tomorrow. We're going to be exploring some egg-based, custardy-based recipes from the 15th century. So we're going to see what happens when I just randomly dump eggs into scalding hot milk as per the recipe. And then we've got my medieval sewing party on Saturday and Friday night and Saturday night for those of you in the Americas. Medieval story time will be on Sunday night for those of you in the Americas. Middle of the night for those of you in Ireland or the Isles. So I thank you all for joining us. I can't really tell who was whose followers really, but we had a really interesting chat this time, everyone. Thank you for all of your really amusing contributions.
And from my side, if you're looking to join in with all that kind of stuff, just click on my page, scroll down to the very bottom, and you'll see Creative Contessa's channel. Click on that and subscribe over to Rachel if you want to see all of her live streams, where she does absolutely amazing stuff over there. So if you're into anything to do with Europe, and even on top of that, Rachel lately has been jumping over to medieval Korean and Asian history as well. So she pretty much has been jumping all over the place. Michal, over at Clans and Dynasties, what's going on this week or this month? What are you guys up to?
Well, I'll be going back to my regular live streaming now. I've moved. So that'll go back to 3 days a week. So if any of you were keeping an eye on, wonder where I disappeared to, obviously I had to move somewhere where I had better signal. So I'll be going back to my lives, which means, well, that's the only thing I've really got planned, because YouTube long form videos are just on the back burner at the minute. But
yeah, they are.
So just come round at 10 o'clock, 10:30 Dublin time till 12:30, whenever I start feeling tired. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Thursday, happy days. Okay, guys, thanks very much. Oh, and of course, if you want to jump into Michal's side, once again, pop over to my channel, Irish Medieval History. Scroll down to the very bottom, and you'll see Michal there as well. Click on his page and subscribe, especially with all these live streams kicking off left, right, and center. And between the jigs and rails, I'll be jumping over to see you guys as well to do collabs and stuff as well. And on top of that as well, Rachel and myself would be live on Tuesday giving the medieval news as well. So we'll be keeping you guys up to date on Tuesday as well. So, which is going to be, guys, what was it, Monday night for you guys? So, other than that, guys, thanks very much, and Slán go Bhaile.